Well, you know, if Tesla would have got his way, there would have been no lag.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. All right, so this paper had come out of a response to Lead Skalman and the idea out there that we could unify the entire understanding by reducing all electricity to a magnetic current. The point of this is that when we take a look at the beginnings of Chinese understanding, and I think all of us here, we already understand that essentially what the Chinese were doing was observing what was in the sky, and then also what they experienced in nature. And they looked at numerology and they saw how everything came together. And they were the first to very explicitly derive this Fibonacci sequence. Of course, it wasn't called Fibonacci. But they did it in, like it wasn't a one person, it was different currents of different schools that focused on different things. And this is a repetitious, I don't know if you want to call it an issue or a habit for humanity, that people focus on different things. And it turns out each of these 8 levels of the first 8 in the sequence of the Fibonacci actually correspond to, you can correspond them to not only the chakras, but to the 8 Bagua themselves.
Welcome to the August 28th edition of The Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we are doing a live stream broadcast with Ramon, leading us down a rabbit hole of electric universe connections between Eastern and Western philosophies. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.
This is an important aspect, of the fractal aspect of the Chinese sciences. So we'll start on the left. So we have the nothingness, the Wuji, which in India could be called Shunyata. There's some other names, but it basically means the void of space. My assumption is that they learned about this after the plasma sheath around Saturn fell. I don't know. There's no evidence that anybody was considering the nothingness prior to the Shang dynasty. We just don't have any real proof of that. There was, however, the consideration of heaven and of the oneness. And later on, we'll look at some of the glyphs from the ancient days and how the glyph for heaven, the God, which is Di, or Shang Di, and for Tao, are all really based around the great squatter man, the giant man. So now the 0 and the 1 form our first initial yin and yang. Okay, but there's still only 1 because 0 and 1 is 1. And the next one, obviously corresponding to God. Now in the paper, I didn't want to waste belief in God on people, so I just called it the emergence of the singular principle. But originally, actually, Shangdi is an older, we can trace discussions of the above God. It's literally, Shangdi means like upper or above God. We could trace that prior to anything we can trace on Tao. The funny thing about the word Tao, though, is that it appears in all of the texts of the 100 schools. So it appears over 100 times in both the Confucius Analects and in the Master Mo text, and of course in the Zhuangzi. And we know that the 5-element people were all interested in the Tao, and even the legalists would talk about the Tao, but they meant it in terms of governance. So they had derived their concepts from the king in the sky. They were really interested in the divine right to rule. And that became a huge part of the foundations of China, because the Emperor Qin, he not only named himself after Huangdi, but that his system, his legalist system, was based on the divine right to rule. And of course, he initiated the project to create the world's largest pyramid, and then it fell through after he died. They stopped building it. So Now we have our first triplet pair, the 0, the 1, and the 1. However, all of them together are really just representing 1. And again, the concept of heaven, or of yang itself, of a unified principle, which we will from here on just call Tao, as the first unified field, is really the singular principle that is guiding. You could call it positivity, or you could call it oneness. There's a lot of names, source, that people use. And the Chinese, the way that they looked at it when they conceived of Tao, it even says in the Tao Te Ching, I don't know whose child it is. It may have even been here before God. But when it's talking about God, of course, by the time of the Tao Te Ching, the word God was probably as loosely used as we would see in the West. But initially, in the West, we know, or the Middle East really, the Lord was referring very specifically to the Saturnian king god, right? The heaven king, or the heaven man, the hermaphroditic Lord. So the Chinese give no indication by the time of the Han period that they knew that Huangdi was not a man. In all the texts, they'll refer to him as a literal emperor, and the same thing with Fuxi and the other, all the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. They'll treat them as people, but they do record very well the inundating. It's an interesting aspect. The inundating waters continue to be a problem all the way into the Shang dynasty, or the Yin dynasty. There's interchangeable names, the Shang or Yin dynasty. I'm going to say Shang because Yin, I don't want you to confuse with Yang. But most technically speaking, it's the Yin dynasty and the Shang people. Now, no one knows exactly where the Shang people came from, but they had very interesting beliefs. They did believe in ritual human sacrifice. They would also, of course, sacrifice the wives and concubines of the lords. They mummified people, and they buried, if they were rich enough, even the women, like certain queens, have been found buried in jade sarcophagi, like their entire body is covered in armor. And I found that an interesting parallel to the Egyptians at the same period. Now the 011, now the 2 ones combining, creating the initial concept of the Taiji, which is yin and yang, of course. That's where you have this heaven and earth dipole. And I'm postulating, of course, that they were observing the electromagnetic and plasma behaviors in the sky. But if you notice, that also creates an asymptote, because man doesn't show up to the third, to the number 3 there, heaven, man, earth. And that's where consciousness becomes the intermingling of the properties of heaven and earth. Literally, mankind, they perceive mankind as the blended offspring of heaven and earth. All things become the blended offspring. However, like in India, they believe that mankind was the 50-50. So male or female, 50-50 heaven and earth combined together. Now, the symbol for earth is completely open. And yang isn't only motion. Yang becomes anything that's stiff, hard, or long. We now know that the phallus for de, as in the Tao Te Ching, the de is symbolized by the 2, the Venus and the Mars, and then a plasma stream going between them that made kind of a phallic shape. And most of you all know, so I don't have to berate it, the castration of Saturn, the removal of those. So the malehood is not only about power and movement, but is also this stubborn, stiff-necked, hard, tall, strong, big, great. In fact, the word later on, we'll see in the sumo paper, is you take the word for big, and then you add a line above it, and you get heaven. But if you take the word for big and you add a phallus, you have great. as in Tai, is in the same Tai as in Taiji. So the Taiji is the ultimate, the penultimate, you could even say, the highest. And Ji literally means the ultimate. So you have the highest ultimate. So they're talking about something above. So you have an above God, meaning that there are little d, and the little d are all over the place, and also the different planets. And then you have the above God, who is controlling all those things, and it's a unified force. So their understanding of heaven actually includes Tao, energy, and God as one thing. And that's a really important thing to understand about the Chinese conceptualization of heaven. Yes, it is a place. And in fact, it's a bureaucratic place that is run by, an emperor, a jade emperor. And there's also in Taoism, the three sovereign pure ones that are just psychological functions in the body. But the point is, as humans, we have a very difficult time observing backwards without seeing the yin yang. So the first yin yang we see is the 0 and 1. Then we have the oneness and the 2. So the 1 and the 2 form. Now we have the 3, the 0, 1, and 2. Now all create our first triplet pair. And it continues on down the line. And the fractal aspect is that in each of these circumstances, they not only do they have to conform and interact, like all the Bagua representing different principles, like say relativity and polarity sit opposite of each other in that relativity belongs to water or the abyss, and polarity belongs to fire or enlightenment, which is called the clinging. And so the two of them go hand in hand because they are both slippery. They're both very difficult to actually grasp a hold of, and yet they oppose each other. And the reason they oppose each other is that the polarity is absolutely vital for you to grasp, and yet the relativity defies your ability to actually grasp them. And so at all times, all of these 8 have to work together. And then they just sum up that everything leads to the 10,000 myriad things. That means everything. Now, the 3, the 5, the 8, and the 13 correspond to now our earthly principles. So the first 4 will correspond to your heavenly principles, where everything's unified. And literally, you find that in references in Egyptian and Sumeria, like before everything was separated. That is also a mental issue. It's not only an issue of time, where we know that time suddenly began, but it is a part of our very psychology. And then the question is, does that come from what we experienced, or is that how we're built? I find it interesting because, we do have 64 codons in our DNA, and there are 64 of the hexagrams formed by the 8 trigrams put one over top of the other. Of course, the one on the top representing heaven and the one on the bottom representing earth. When you double heaven, you get the image of an enduring, unending, unerring power. And when you combine the double earth, where you have all holes in the middle, you have the ultimate of the nourishing stillness recharging principle. Now the 3, the 5 combine to create the 8, and you could also view it as the 2 raised to the power of 3 combined to create the 8. And I think that's a really important point too, because you have the dual aspects of the mind, and then you have a 3-dimensional space that we're existing in. And so if you raise that dual aspect to the power of 3, then you have these 8 chakras that show up. And yet 8 is also one of the numbers in the 8. And then the 13, of course, you have lots of references in every culture to the 13. And in Chinese, the most pertinent is the 12 channels, or 12 dual hour rhythms. And then the center pole, which is itself also called the Taiji. And it descends from the crown to the perineum, but it actually connects heaven and earth itself. And the 8th chakra then becomes actually a floating chakra. Some will also say that there's a chakra below you in the ground. That's unnecessary because it's ground. But this eighth one is technically non-existing, so they go from the bottom up, and so you have red and your lowest chakra, or 13, and then you go backwards up towards the crown. So red, orange, yellow, blue, and then ultraviolet would be above. Does that make sense? And then, of course, the earth would correspond to all the heat. Literally, the meaning of heaven, which in the I Ching is called Qian, which is a homonym for Tian. The meaning of it is the creative. And the meaning for the earth is not soil. There is a separate word for soil. But the word here more means the nurturing, or the you could say the substrata, the matrix of which things are made. And so the interaction of those two is very much basically what we're talking about in physics to this day. You'll see references to, in quantum physics, to different solutions to to quantum mechanics, and ultimately they come down to the same thing the Chinese were talking about: chaos and fate and destiny and luck, in different ways that matter that originates in the creative field interacting. And we could call it the ether. That would maybe be the easiest way for us to interact with this kind of thinking. But the bottom line is that there's something, and then it's interacting with almost like a clay of nature, and that it creates the myriad formations. But the five are what actually guide the transformation of these five things. So for that, what we need to do is go to the next tab over to the Chinese paper. And I think it's on page 3.
Yeah, I've already got page 3 set up, bro.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. So this page here shows you the Chinese conceptualization of the 5 phases. Now, the word Qing actually literally does mean phases. And now this is an interesting thing that has come about. And the influence of the Chinese on our Western science can't really be underestimated, because you had psychologists studying it. Carl Jung wrote the foreword to the Wilhelm Bain. Of course, Wilhelm was German. Bain's translated from German to English. He wrote a fantastic foreword for the I Ching itself. The I Ching famously was the book that Qin Shi Huangdi, for which China is named, China, right? He would burn any book he could find. It was on order, except the I Ching, or the Zhouyi is another name for it. He was afraid of the Zhouyi because there was a mystical effect where you can use the oracle to entangle your thoughts and feelings, but most importantly, the image in your mind, like the screen inside your mind, and get uncanny answers just through binary math. And it works to this day. It's unbelievable, the amount. I had a consultation just the other day, and the woman was asking about moving. She didn't tell me at all. I had her do the tossing of the coins, and it came up with the Wanderer. We did a tossing on about a marriage that has since fallen through, and it came up with the Marrying Maiden. And years in advance, came up with the Marrying Maiden like 12 years in advance. And it said that she was too strong, don't marry her. And it did end up in a bad situation. So it's a fascinating fact of the I Ching that it's just very useful. Carl Jung, again, in his thinking, he was talking about synchronicity and entanglement and Schrodinger's cat and all those things that were, of course, brand new. And at the time he wrote that foreword, would have been considered just as much bunk as anything that we discussed. So I've posted here, these are the different phases in comparison with each other. The thing that I think makes the Chinese stuff so different is that the word Xing, meaning phases, they mean it more literally than elements. When we think of the elements, especially Greek or in Ayurveda, we mean building blocks like bricks, and from that we kind of came up with the atomic elements, right? We still will call them elements, but in Chinese, they really were literally just shifting of energy at different times of the day, different seasons. For example, we're leaving fire right now and we're transitioning into earth, which we call late summer in Chinese, but in the West, typically we'll call it Indian summer in America. Now, they didn't have a phase called air, but they noticed that in the spring, which corresponds to wood, that you have more wind. And so wind the literal stuff that it's made of, what they really actually mean is the filamentary formation of everything. So like mycelium, neurons, filamentary structures in the universe. So you notice that it has an interaction with, say, metal. Now, metal is, well, let's do fire first, right? Because fire is corresponding to our plasma. So the filamentary structure is interacting with the plasma in this line of thinking. And then the two of them are having a special relationship with metal. Metal is going to represent, here I've put it as condensed matter, but generally speaking, metal really corresponds to conductivity, and conductivity, of course, to the electromagnetic force. So you have this interaction of filamentary structures, plasma, and the electromagnetism or conductivity. Metal is also the father of the five, right? Earth is the mother, and you can move Earth to the center, and then the other four will actually gravitate around it, and you'll get your sun symbol or your Celtic cross. The Earth being the center is really probably about the yellow, and the yellow being in the center is, of course, probably about Saturn. So it's really fascinating. My speculation is that if we were to trace, if we had perfect records, which we don't because the Chinese mostly wrote on bamboo splits, but if we were to trace it back, the earliest indication of these five elements, I guarantee you that they came during the Jovian period, because they probably are initiated from the southern pole. At any rate, I think it's absolutely fantastic. The different forces then become your Dao De. Again, De is more masculine related. It's like internal. It's like if you take Dao and you combine it with your Qi, that's De. And it also means, because the glyph was is scratched into rocks and into shells, came to also mean eyes. And so it became the owl eye formation. And it literally became the ability to look another man in the eye and see if he's lying to you or not. So De became kind of not a catch-all term, but a specific term that catches a lot of meaning in old societies where your word was your bond. So think of the Native Americans. Most of those tribes had no word for lie. They would rather die than even conceive of not being able to just tell a man what they're thinking. One of the reasons that we can tell a difference here in the Ohio River Valley about the European forts versus if they were Hopewell related is that the Hopewell, all of their structures they're not true fortifications. They've been sometimes mislabeled as fortifications, but they're not. And one of the sites I just visited, I can tell it was a European made because there was an arbitrary stone wall stuck in the middle of up on the side of this mountain. But the thing is that natives didn't have any use for that because they just would scale the size of the hill. Europeans thought in terms of, let's divide this area up, and this is mine, and that's yours, and the assumption is you're going to attack me in order to take my fort. But that's not how the natives did. After they wiped out the Welsh, they abandoned all of it. And in fact, it became understood among all the tribes that no one would live in Kentucky until it was the historic period. But by then, they had sold it. So many societies were that way. They had, if they moved on from an area, they never lived in that original area. They honored that space, and they wouldn't lie. So that's that concept of duh. We see it more in the West in concepts of chivalry, knighthood, that kind of thing. Li literally means force. But if you look at the glyph for Li, what you actually see is the word for arm. So it means strong. But the arm we know is associated with the Saturnian and Jovian myth. So we're not 100% sure. Of course, Talbot thinks it's all Saturnian. And then Julian West and John Cook thought that they were Jovian. I'd say it's probably Jovian on account of the associations of Mount Olympus and Meru, etc., with Jupiter. And also that Jupiter was considered physically strong, right? He literally Zeus wrestled Cronus to the ground. So I think probably this concept of force, or the force, probably the arm is related to the Jovian. And I'd have to look to see if the area, there's probably not even a Shang script for it. There's probably only a bronze seal. Qi and Jing, of course, Jing just means like a shaking or vibrating. But where we really see the shaking and the vibrating is in the word for thunder, which in the scheme of the eight, thunder belongs to rotation. It belongs to action, and its own quote element. But it's in next to fire because the interaction of those two is literally lightning. And what does thunder sit across from? It sits across from wind. So we know that winds carry the charge, represent the movement of charge. Earlier, somebody was asking, I think it was Chris was asking about dragons. In the West, dragons have a generally malevolent meaning, especially by the time of the Renaissance. But in China, dragons represent basically four things. One, rivers. Two, tornadoes. Three, transformation and wisdom. And four, the Tao, the movement of the undulation of things below. A book I could definitely recommend is The Propensity of Things by Francois Julian, where the description of how art and good storytelling comes down to this bamboo note effect, where there's an expansion, contraction, but not in a monochromatic and dull way, but always a new twist in the tale. And of course, just like in the old days, they would always leave a cliffhanger in the story. But the sudden twist and turn and the unexpected would create a new a rejuvenation of interest, and it would continue on like that. And anything that's good, it's like that. A relationship, you don't want it to be too monotonous. I feel like I've beat this to death. If I might just mention in the Ayurveda, the main thing that they focus on are the triplex of the doshas, and how they really like the mingling of the three, and the way that those doshas interact sort of approximate the concept of the Taiji and the yin yang, and how it interacts with the five elements. So the two systems are really similar, but they're also a little different. They both have channels and the belief of the division in these energy centers. It's funny about the phases and how that word shows up in English and we use it. It's also really interesting that in the Chinese internal, we have Neigong, we see the word Tian not only as heaven, but Tian meaning field. Now the symbol for field is actually the Celtic cross again, the glyph of the sun, which became the earth glyph now. we use in astrophysics is the Earth glyph. Well, that became square, kind of squarified. That came to literally mean a field. The field shows up in the word for conflagration and catastrophe. So the burning and destruction of agriculture became associated with the god. But in the anatomy, this field became associated with an emanating energetics that happens basically from the, in three places, from the belly button down a little bit, and then all the way back into the sacral chakra. Then inside the chest, where the Da is stored, which, if you follow Gnostic tradition, is at the entering the kingdom place, right? Where you're supposed to clean out your temple to make a lodging place for the Holy Spirit. The word for the Holy Spirit, the Ruach, is functionally exactly the same as Qi and prana. And then the third Dantian is actually up in the head, and of course associated with the third eye and the pineal gland. So the Egyptian stuff becomes interrelated to the Chinese and the Hindu systems because they're all based on things that were really observed in the sky. I think the crowning difference between them, though, is that the Chinese did not make any long-lasting hardcore religions. All the hardcore Taoism came about after Buddhism arrived and demonstrated a belief in the need to purify people because they were bad. Before that, it was just like the Greeks. Everybody went to Hades, right? And if you died, if you weren't important, like if you didn't work for the government and you weren't some kind of sage, you didn't go to heaven. You went to the underworld, or the other world would be the better way of actually saying it. The concept of needing to purify the soul and of going to hell arrived after Buddhism arrived, and there was a competition between Taoism and Buddhism, and Taoism became more and more religious in the religious period. And that really all started in the late Han Dynasty. But prior to that, Taoism did not have a religious bent on it in that direction. When you read Zhuangzi, there's no indication that Zhuangzi was meditating in order to save his soul. It was more that he was interested in playing with his reality, and he also knew that in the ancient days, the Tao, whatever the Tao was, which could not be named, and maybe something we never ever figure out, all of electromagnetism. If you conformed to it, then you flourished, and if you didn't, you perished. And that was it. That was the basis of the entire belief system, whether you were a legalist, a Taoist, a Confucianist, a Moist, five-element person, just a regular materialist. Everyone was trying to conform to Tao.
Raymond, can I interrupt to make a point?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think the reason why they didn't make a religion out of it is because they put it all in the characters of their words, of their writing itself. They made the writing itself based on Noah's story. That's
an interesting point.
All kinds of things like that.
There's one problem with that. The way that we learned about the Shang bones is they were actually being destroyed, and they were discovered by an anthropologist who was getting herbs and saw the writings on the bones, which were, of course, turtle shell, and they were being used for Chinese medicine. In China, there was never an emphasis in that ancient day of revering the letters like you would see in Egypt with all the massive amounts of temples. They would throw, when they did their oracle castings, they would literally burn the shells and observe how they cracked, and then they would throw them out. And it was only basically the king or the lord of the village and the wu, which was most often a woman, but not always. Some wu were men, And Wu kind of approximates the concept of shaman, but not exactly. They would have known the characters, but most of the people didn't know anything about it. There wasn't a widespread emphasis on literacy, not until, and I wouldn't call it widespread, but not until much later in much later dynasties, which are still ancient to us, but certainly much newer than the period that we're talking about, when they started actually creating the first universities. But prior to that, the learning was assumed to be a noble affair. A lot of people think that the Four Noble Truths in India are called that because they're so good. Actually, they're the Noble Truths because they were to apply to the nobility. They were noble for the people who were thought of as being capable of actually pursuing enlightenment and the escape of samsara, which the Buddhists still call the world of the red dust. Samsara means the world of the red dust, which is, of course, a reference to the Mars situation. So let's scroll down here in this paper, see what else we have. Okay. So this table, it's hard for me to see. Okay, there we go. This is just an interesting table that I put together about the different ways that paradigms are shifting, and that's just really neither nor there. But if anybody has interest, let's keep scrolling down. I think it could be a useful table for you guys if you're ever in a kind of like an argument. Okay. Keep going, keep going, keep going. That's just showing that the Chinese were very inventive. They were incredibly inventive of the current modern, keep going, of the current modern world that we use. They have a huge percent, not that far. Go now go up to the previous page. Right. So here, this table is demonstrating how effective. Well, not that far. Go back down to the table of sciences. Okay. So this table is demonstrating how effective this science was. On the left are a list of surprising technologies that a lot of people would not have assumed that the Chinese actually did first. Some people know here, like the press and paper, but systematic chemistry, we have evidence that the Chinese, when they performed their, what we call alchemy, that they actually knew that they were mixing certain elements together to create something. And one of the best examples of this is the similarity between Egyptian blue and Han purple. And one of the things I love to point out the most about Han purple, of course, this dye was discovered when they dug up the terracotta warriors. It evaporated almost instantly, and so they had to stop digging up terracotta warriors and start.
We lost you, Ray.
Touched it.
Can you restart at they had to stop digging up terracotta warriors?
Can you hear me now or no?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. So they had to stop digging up these terracotta warriors because the dye kept evaporating right off of the terracotta warriors. And they found a way to preserve them. And the pictures of the actual terracotta warriors they're really surprisingly colorful if we get a chance to look at them. Well, they did an analysis on these terracotta, on this purple, and they found that it had superconductive properties, in which they are exploring because it appears that this dye's chemical property will actually enable an improvement in the efficiency of electromagnetic levitation, like say in trains and elevators, anywhere where we might actually use electromagnets, this dye appears in some way to improve the efficiency. Now, the similarity to the Egyptians, apparently there's only one, like a tail molecule that's on that makes it different than the Egyptian blue. So now the Egyptians may have had systematic chemistry well before. I think there's great evidence that the Egyptians had an entire chemical factory. However, I don't have firm evidence of that. Like I don't have any writings, and that might be something that Sean would know more about. But I do know that the Han purple was in existence more than 2,000 years ago. And there's a lot of indications that they were trying to find ways. Of course, their biggest interest was in medicine, but that they were trying to find different kinds of materials by mixing them and cooking them. Now, the interesting thing that they have in their alchemy is a really interesting belief where the word for metal and gold is the same word. And it has, of course, plasmaglyphic references. But the belief that they had, and I think, Rick, this will really fascinate you, is that if you left iron ore out in the sun long enough, that the sun would transmute it into gold. And that is one of the hidden meanings of the word for metal, Jing. Now, you notice that the word Jing is a homonym for the word for energy inside the body that vibrates. So this is not an accident. They used homonyms all the time. Of course, they had different characters so that you would have different words and then by context, obviously. But the homonym situation happens all the time. And although there are a limited number of combinations because it's a kind of a syllabic language system, right? There's always a consonant followed by a vowel. Despite that, there's enough different words that it is a little bit unusual that you keep getting these homonyms. So you have Jing meaning metal and gold, and then you have Jing meaning energy, and in particular, a vibrating internal energy. And in Taiji, we refer to Fa Jing, meaning to emit the Jing, or it to come out of the body and to basically to inflict damage. And this shaking energy that can come out of the body is described, the legitimate Fa Jing, to accomplish it, you have to send electricity into the other person. So if you actually apply your hand to their body and then you do Fa Jing, which you can think of as the 1-inch punch if you like, that needs to actually send a paralyzing electricity through their entire body. Right? So anyways, I find it fascinating about the different technologies and how advanced they were. If they were truly a superstitious, pseudo-scientific society, which, they, for one reason or another, the Victorians would not allow, and even the modernists after the Victorians would not allow that China was a scientific society. But in many ways, they very clearly were, because they observed nature and then they tested their results. I think everybody probably here's favorite Chinese invention would be the south-pointing chariot. Now, it's interesting because it's called a south-pointing chariot, not a north-pointing chariot, which tells us two things. One, that probably the origins of this magnetic chariot that could always point your way back home actually goes back further than we think, and goes all the way back to the antiquity before the planet turned over. And then B, that they were using these magnets so purposefully means that they probably had an understanding that there were field lines that could be followed. Now, they didn't call them ley lines or field lines. They called them dragon lines. And these dragon lines are associated also with mountains. And in particular, if you have a mountain chain, this gets into the Feng Shui, if you have a mountain chain, you have the different ridges of the mountain, and then you have the head. And in you have youthful mountains, and you have middle-aged mountains, and you have old mountains. Here in Kentucky, we have decaying vein dragons. And what you'll find is that the most important mountains in Kentucky energetically, what they have are these ridge backs, and then the neck is cut, and then a head, which looks like a knob, is on the end. And most of the energy is at the head. And it's bar none every time. Berea Indian Fort Mountain, which of course was Welsh or Viking, we're not sure, but we're pretty sure it was Welsh. The fort was built there. There's no permanent well on top, so it wasn't the best place to put a fort. Well, it is the center of the chi vortex that Edgar Cayce was talking about when he said Sedona and Berea both have an energy vortex. And he was saying specifically Berea, Kentucky, would be there after the next deluge. That's what Edgar Cayce said. Now, when you go and you hike at the pinnacles, there are 3 basic trails. And it really does look like the legs spread out this way, and then the head is over here, and it's then cut at the neck, and then there's this big crag that sticks up. And that happens all the time in Kentucky. There's lots of these lines. There's even a couple places in the knobs where the Lichtenberg formations are, and from Google Earth, it looks like a dragon. It looks like a dragon tattoo, kind of like a tribal tattoo from above. It's really is really quite fascinating. So they somehow understood that the energy flows through there. And I have a modern example of this. There is a really fantastic ley line that extends from Georgia. I now know it goes all the way down to Georgia because I went down there, up to Ohio. But it's strongest between Tennessee and the Cave Run, which is where the Red River National Gorge, and all the Natural Bridge, and it's kind of an international destination. Now, in this ley line, the I-75 crosses, it does like an S, and it crosses over it. In that area, people mysteriously drive suddenly 90, 95 miles an hour, and there's more wrecks in that area. It's an uncanny thing. You'll be driving along, and you think that you're going normal, and you look down, you're driving faster, and there's a rise in your pulse as you cross over that line. Yeah, if you zoom in, right there, you see, right about where you had your mouse. No, a little bit more to the north. You see the yellow line coming down as I-75. Yeah, right there as it bends through the green of the forest, there's an inexplicable number, and of course, Berea is just north of that. There's an inexplicable number of wrecks, particularly, sadly, people in RVs, which don't do very well when they wreck into semi-trucks. And it's a really strange thing too. Most of the best places to hike that people know about are either north of there or really far south in the Big South Fork. But there's a ton of actually great, pristine, some of the most primal energy in that region, which feels just like as if you're in Costa Rica or something. I mean, it's deep, deep jungle. You're sweating. The waterfalls are flowing. They're beautiful. It's just it's really quite unbelievable. Now that ley line is actually different than the Appalachians to the east and the knobs to the west, which are Lichtenberg formations. So probably an example of a long trailing. One of the gods would have gone along and lifted that up. And it's also like sandstone, so we know that it. At one time it was in the core. It was in the lowland sea, forming coral beds and such. But I've found lots of examples of the electrically charged stuff in that area. I'm trying to think if there's more stuff in this paper. And that's basically. I just cover the Fibonacci again. I did put in some quotes from the Tao Te Ching, the I Ching. I mentioned Markland convection, but in a later page, here on page 14, I have quotes from the Ley, which is actually older than Tao Te Ching. A lot of people think the Tao Te Ching.
Which tab, Ray?
That's the right one, just down to 14. So the Ley was not known to be the oldest because it was found later. It was in a compendium that had been brought together. There were scholars that worked, or they were essentially the sinologists, right? They worked on their own culture, but they gathered Chinese texts from all over China, whether they were Han Chinese or not. And then they compiled them for the emperor, and they would make a product. And the most famous first compendium was Luan. Lu, of course, is the Sionic name of the Han dynasty. And he wasn't a threat to the throne. So in order to gratiate himself to the emperor, he had a team of academics compile the best texts from all the 100 schools that could be found, and bring them together in one famous compendium, which you can purchase, Luan's. I definitely recommend it. If you want Chinese wisdom, there's nothing like the Luan text. And in amongst those was the Ley. And the Ley is, when they analyzed the scripts, turns out it had older characters than all the Tao Te Ching that we have inherited. Doesn't mean it is actually older, but we think it's older than even the man that the Tao Te Ching was said to have been written by, Lao. Now, we don't know that it was written by Lao because the grand historian, he was sort of one of those characters. He's like Yolo Morgan. He would kind of have some facts and then most Taoists believe that Lao was the physical embodiment of Lao Tzu, and that Lao Tzu himself is this ancient embodiment of the truth, which you would again go all the way back to Shangdi and to the original Squatter Man God. So here you see three of my favorite collections from the verses, and culminating there in the middle, that when you have the chi, this de within you, right? The de, remember, is composed now according to this text. The de is actually the combination of the de and your chi are in your chest, and so you've entered the kingdom here. And when you have no delusions, then externally there will be no disasters. But if you look at the word for disaster, what you find is rain. You find a glyph that has about 20 to 30 individual down tick marks. So it would take all day to write it. So they meant disasters. They meant it literally in the old days, but then that word comes down and they mean, of course, any kind of calamity in your life. So this science is a different kind of science. And this is the most important thing I want people to understand, is that for them, science was only science if it improved humanity, if it improved a human lot in life. And they could not ignore one side of the equation for the other. So one thing that Chinese science, for good or bad, it would never create a fossil fuel burning airplane. Now, that doesn't mean they would never try to create flight, but they would always try to power it in some kind of natural way, or with electricity if they could figure that out. But they would never think of destroying nature originally in order to do that. And the irony is, the science is so human-centric that the Chinese medicine really had a huge disregard for, and still does, in China, it's really bad, for endangered species. This human-centered idea is sort of like Hippocrates. It's like first do no harm, but only applied to humans, unfortunately. In the modern day, that's all been out the window. But originally, this was a very important part of the science, that the communion of self and environment was all embracing. And so, yes, they would use wood, like in war, they would chop down forests, But the Shaolin temple, for example, Shao meaning small or little or young, that forest is no longer little or young at all. It's very ancient now, because despite however many wars that came through there, they just never slashed and burned the entire thing. We contrast that with what happened here in the eastern United States, especially in Kentucky, when they wanted to get at that pig iron for industrialization. They clear cut everything. And I mean everything. Not even the smallest tree would be left to stand. It looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off, if anybody ever gets to see those. So when you keep your mind unimpaired, so there's no impedance in the circuit, then you won't encounter heavenly disasters, meet with harm at the hands of others. And that becomes the definition of a sage. So it's not just so-and-so knows a lot, or this guy's is really wise, or that guy has a lot of students. It's specifically if the dynamo of chi inside the chest prevents disaster. So if your life science translates into your marriage is harmonious, your career is harmonious, your finances are harmonious, your house is harmonious, that's when you can be called a sage. And this concept is very old. Like I say, this is like 2,700 years ago, which, bear in mind, is only halfway between when we think it really started. And when I say we, I'm still obviously a minority. Among Sinologists, you're not going to see people talking about Taoism as older, but it has to be older because, as I said, there's more mentions of the word Tao in the Master Mo and in the Confucian Analects than there is in the Tao Te Ching. The word Tao just does not appear enough in the Tao Te Ching as to compared to those other books.
One line stands out for me big time.
Go ahead.
Within the mind, there is yet another mind.
That's the most important part in Taoism. Yeah. They call that the numinous mind, or the mind of Tao. This becomes a really important concept in the Tuanjin, or complete reality Taoism, or more modernly, the Dragon Gate, Longmen. But it's important in all of it, in all the Taoist schools and all the alchemies, that the mind is the essential. Everything is measured through the mind. So
I believe they're talking about the morphogenic field that Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talks about in the Akashic record that was brought up by Edgar Casey. And everybody that is a Christian talking about the Christ consciousness. I believe that's what they're talking about.
Krishna consciousness or Buddha consciousness. That they're talking about a real thing. And maybe some of the viewers may not have ever heard that there's a mind inside the mind. But that's an absolutely vital thing to understanding ancient sciences. There's a lot of people running around and they're chasing.
It's also called your soul.
You could call it the soul, but the soul actually is a different word in Chinese. So there's actually more than one kind of soul in these ancient systems, right? You have life souls, and this is in the Native America too. Life souls, and then you have ethereal souls, which go on. Right, and the life souls are magnetized. They come from the organs. We might liken it to an emergent consciousness caused by the fractal complexity of interacting nerves. But regardless, there's an energy inside the organs and tissues, and those can generate plasmoids, which can attach to people, which we would approximate as ghosts. But generally speaking, they're magnetized to the earth. When the person dies, they want to go down. Now, it was the Chinese medicine's doctor job in the village when they hung a criminal to take a ceramic jar and hold it under the anus of the deceased hanging criminal, the psycho, and capture the Po as it came out of his body. Because the deranged Po, they didn't want it being a hungry ghost, a Gui, to go about the village causing harm. You could also translate Gui as demon. So it could literally attach to people, especially the people that it knew. Whereas the Hun is the ethereal soul, and there are approximately 3, but you can just say 1 if you prefer. And this Hun, of course, is magnetized to heaven. This is, again, applying the empiricism in all aspects. In Feng Shui, medicine, everything, it becomes applied. The Tai Chi and the 3, the heaven, man, earth philosophy. In the heaven, man, earth philosophy, it turns into Shen, which is spirit, Jing, or Qi, which is man, and Jing, which is essence, belongs to earth. And the Shun spirit is composed of 5. It shows up again, whereas one of them is spirit, 2 of them are different types of souls, the Hun and the Po. And then there's the mind, or the intellect is a better translation, the Yi, and the willpower, which is the Jur. Okay, and I know that's a lot, but I just wanted to point that out.
No, that was enlightening, very enlightening.
Okay, now this, let's see. Do you guys want to talk about a little bit about the scalar and the electricity, or did you want to talk more about the channels or the glyphs? Which direction did you want to go? And any questions?
Oh, the scalar and the electricity, eh?
Okay, so that would be the far right one.
That would be more interesting to the people in the audience. I mean, that's what they're here for, is the electric stuff, right?
Well, the charge, the channels, the circuit I have in my paper is also an electrical diagram, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm open at this point. I've given the spiel as to why people should be excited about Chinese science, and it is different because you activate a different part of your mind. It's an inductive science. It's not a deductive science alone. There's an emphasis on the inductive for the sake of wisdom and heart and feeling and in interacting with nature. A great example of this, I went on a backwoods hike with a huge group of people, and they were all hikers, and they just really got lost with their GPS. Everything was GPS. For me, when I hike, I'm using the birds. I'm looking at the light, how it lays on the ground, how does the water move, and I never get lost when I'm in the woods because I'm using an inductive. When I was looking, when I was surveying to make sure that some mounds had not been disturbed, again, some Welsh mounds. These ones are stone mounds, cairns really, and I found that wall. At one point, I followed a road, and I started to encounter impedance, and it just looked hairy, like it looked like stuff you didn't want to walk through. A lot of people would just walk through it. I've been hiking with a lot of country boys and stuff. They don't care; they just keep going. But for me, I knew that there was this was not the direction that I was intended to go. And as the natives would say, spirit didn't want me to go that way. So I turned around and I went and I took my boys and descended. And sure enough, boom, then I found the mountains all over the place. So I use that all the time, but it's not a deductive science. So I don't know exactly what was missed. I can only know that if I go back and I uncover everything. I liken it to deductive sciences are based on you go into the room, you feel around, you make an educated guess, you flip on the light, and then you flip it off again, and you get a little bit at a time. Whereas in inductive science is you go into the room and you try to get the light first, and as much light as possible, and then you start crafting the room. Unfortunately, that led Chinese culture became full of lots of different kinds of things. Their Chinese bestiary is full of it's animals that don't exist. But they also happen to record animals that now we only know about because they recorded them. And so you're like, well, on the one hand, they're using empiricism and observation, and they're trying to categorize these animals and describe them. But on the other hand, the language is not centered around classification. And the emphasis on precision was not there outside of, say, designing their seismograph or architecture. The way architecture, they were incredibly precise. Surveying, all that kind of work where they, like engineering projects, dams, they used to use dams and dikes regularly in war. So they were scientific in that manner, but they weren't interested in the precision. And even up into the 1800s, they just did not see the value of keeping time to the minute. They only kept it relative to the 2 hour hour, right? So they had the hour of the rooster and the hour of the dog, etc. And that was just considered good enough. In the modern world, of course, it isn't. But at that time, it lasted for thousands of years that way. Whether that's good or bad, I guess I'll leave to the audience to judge. I think that there's a value to having both and having an access to both. So now what you're looking at there is the result of after I had done electric field measurements, and I was trying to figure out how to describe. So what had happened is I came across a paper by an electrical engineer and Chinese medicine expert in Taiwan. And I had already been thinking about how to describe, how to take things to the next level. And basically, this is an example of the inductive and the deductive working together. I ended up with this this model. Now, it's a what I call semi-symbolic model. Now, some of the values are known for the circuits. Bear in mind, each of the circuits is in my model is representing the entire channel, which might be a nerve or it might be a microtubule. It might be one of these new organs. Thank you, Buddy, for the tag on that. It was really amusing that the West is discovering the Sanjiao organ over and over again, right? It's like, oh, fascia are so important. Yeah, they are. In the middle jiao, the enteric organ, they discovered that a couple years ago. They're like, look at this new organ we discovered. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. New. So the energy also has to be described in the point itself, behaving and conforming to the anatomy. So what we have here is an attempt to create an electric circuit which represents the entire channel and the point, and I've also constrained it to the biomedical, so that if we have something like inflammation, how does the body maintain flow down the circuit? The source of voltage has to exceed the out. If the in does not exceed the out, it goes backwards. Now I put the zener in there to represent kind of like a barrier, because energy does flow, and it does flow backwards too, by the way. In a system of martial arts study like Death Touch, actually that's one of the most important facts, is that you can strike the point and cause a reverse signal to counterflow the channel backwards up the circuit. There's a lot of elements in here that all have to do with various anatomical features. The basic gist, though, is that we should be able to actually, we've got some of the parameters and they're listed down below, but we should be able to actually detect some of these. The problem we're going to run into is we're going to need supercomputers to do this, because we have different kinds of tissues. We'll have different inductances and capacitances and resistances. And then secondly, there's too many, when you interact with different analog circuits like this, they interfere with each other. So what we'll have to do is actually digitize and then simulate these over lots of nodes. And so this is one of my big goals in life, is to create the first, let's say, 1,000-point circuit node system that takes the electric field readings and from the scan. Of course, we need the scanner, right? It needs to be the first thing that is accomplished, is to create the scanning device that reads electromagnetic fields, reads thermography, and ideally even does the Kirlian work while they're on the slab, and then inputs that information into the computer. Then the computer, assigning based on relative position of where the fields were being measured, assigning that back into the graph, simulates these up and down to see what's wrong. So in a way, it's a lot like the healing is voltage. Why is this thing flipping me? Rick, help me out. The healing is voltage guy.
Gerald Pollock.
No. It's
Eileen
easy one.
McCusick. Eileen McCusick. No.
No, but I do admire her work as well. I haven't read an extensive amount of things that she's written. Jerry Tennant. So Jerry Tennant's interest is primarily in the source in voltage and the way that it, you need to keep it strong. And I agree, you do, because for this transformer circuit to work, for basically the negative energy in your body, whether it's a disease or inflammation or a virus or maybe whiplash or something like that, or maybe just the results of metabolic process, right? There's a lot of metabolic processes we have, whether they are normal or like that produce urea, or a disease process that produces extra crystals, like in gout. The byproduct of the metabolism is a form of being qi itself. So your body is producing its own disease. We need those channels to stay healthy, to stay flush. The key, though, is understanding that it's not a copper wire system, not like this diagram. That's the problem with the diagram, is that it's reliant on understanding of circuit law. And the reality is there's a fluid dynamics situation to do with these channels. They've actually found the channels through scanning. And also they now have, if anybody ever wants to watch Strolling Under the Skin, they have cameras small enough to actually look at the various structures inside of the tissue and the fascia, and they stretch and change shape non-linearly. So they don't stretch like a rubber band. As you stretch them, it looks like a bad spider web, like a black widow spider web, but it'll change shape, and it won't look the same and stretched out. It'll actually reconform right in front of your eyes. They've got that on scope now. It's a fantastic video, Strolling Under the Skin. And so we can actually see the Sanjiao organ at work and the channels, what they call the Jingluo, at work, interacting with each other. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that we understand the electrical part of that. It would be nice if the people doing that work actually put instrumentation and were measuring the voltages. But I think Jerry Tennant and my work and this engineer from Taiwan, that we're heading in the right direction. And I figure that because there was a paper released about 3 months after mine, which used function block diagrams that were basically exactly like my circuit, a little less complete, because I had on there also the constraint of it has to conform to biomedical needs such as inflammation, infection, etc. How do we keep infection like gangrene from going back upwards? We have to have circuit features like the fuse there that will try to, because the body will actually try to burn out that spot. Remember, this circuit is not representing, it's not a circuit in the body like that. It's a model to represent the behavior of the point and of the channel. I only bring it up because I think it's really fascinating that we're now at a place in society where we now have a need to use our modern deductive science to explain something that they understood a long time ago, and they observed it in nature and in the sky, and were able to create an entire medicine around that. And the two will actually begin to marry. We are starting to see emerging pattern diagnosis in the West, and one of the best examples I use for that is fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is a diagnosis, A, of exclusion, and B, of several things coming together. You could also say hypoglycemia, like the various long list of symptoms that come from hypoglycemia. It is a very specific thing, but it has a cluster of things that come together. So if you see those clinically, that's a pattern. And those patterns coming together form really kind of a whole new way of diagnosis. And it's starting to actually challenge Chinese medicine. We're having a hard time with some of these modern diseases because people are coming in and they have a cluster of things. They'll have diabetes and different kinds of arthritis combined with psoriasis and irritable bowel. And all of this is explainable in Chinese medicine, but the roadmap is really hard to explain to the person. And it's very hard for them to get any help in Western medicine because every doctor they go to is going to treat a different part of that with a different drug, and they're going to chase it.
And then the drugs interact with the other drugs and then cause problems.
Yes, exactly. And then they want to go backwards, but it's not so easy to go backwards as it was to go forwards into having the drugs. Right? It's very hard to come off of your 4 heart and cholesterol meds and get on a single herbal formula. It would have been much better if 10 years ago you started the herbal formula or the supplement or a combination of them. And so having this circuit diagram, it is my firm belief, based on what I've observed, that the Chinese were the first to understand when they said that the wind is the carrier of 10,000 diseases, which meant everything. They were talking about charges caused by friction or swept along ahead of a front that actually entered through the pores, deposited into the nerves and channels, interrupted the flow of these circuits, and caused disease, which would mean we can now try and create a device that pushes these charges out. The only thing we know to do so far is cause people to pee, defecate, sweat, on a rare occasion throw up. But basically, that's it. You think about this, when people have...
No, there's one more, but I'm not going to mention it. It has to do with,
when people have low energy in our society, we encourage them to take a stimulant. But a stimulant robs the body of energy because it blocks the sensation of fatigue, and it causes them to tap into their essence. And it does that in order to, say, raise blood pressure, like caffeine. And it will do that throughout the periphery. And that's to cause that signal to get stronger, to pump, and to get further through the body. But that's a one-way drain, right? Because you're adding over here to drain over here. But according to my research, to get a person to feel like they have qi, essentially, you just need to get rid of Bing qi. And Bing qi, from what I can tell, is nothing more than various charges. Now, different kinds of charges. I found correlations with protons from the sun and with pain. So perhaps, like as people, they would report more pain change in a single visit on days that had higher proton density.
Dormant viruses are active. Sorry, Raymond, I need to say this. Dormant viruses are activated by energy. They get bombarded with a certain amount of energy or a certain frequency. They come back to life.
That's correct. Now, in Chinese medicine, we have a polar view of it, where the zheng qi and the bing qi don't want to get along, right? They don't want to be together. So the return of zheng qi to the body, which is correct qi, which, by the way, the word zheng is referring directly to the uprightness of the cosmic pole. It actually is in the glyphs it's got the cosmic pole in it. And in one case, and I forget exactly where, you can actually see a pulse of energy coming from the planet God and going down to the ground. So they understood that the heaven and earth was interacting and that energy was being shifted from one to the other, which reminds us of the Ramses stele talking about the transfer of power from the Father to the Son. This is very interesting because, of course, then that gets very religious. But in the zheng qi, when you return the zheng qi, let's say I use stomach 36, which is, about 3 inches roughly below the kneecap on the right. You can feel it's kind of a mound, kind of a tender but very full point on the outside of the shin there. Now, if I thrust that, I can do what's called setting the mountain on fire. I can go 3 times, and I can go so deep, and your whole body will start to sweat. You then will have cold sweats come out. In fact, my student today, he had been thrown from a horse a few days ago. He had a frog bruise on his shin, so I rubbed it out, and his whole body, he had kind of a miniature shock. His whole body sweat, and this cold sweat came out of him. His face turned green from the bilirubin, And, I did all the little revival points and brought his energy back up. And then his eyes were clearer. So he had this bing means to strike, in his leg, and it was influencing his entire body, making him susceptible to yin. And this yin is, of course, meaning darkness, not meaning female at all. So you can use stomach 36 to increase the signal. Now, it's been proven to cause an increase in your white and red blood cells. But also, we know it does one other thing. It causes peristalsis. So immediately after, all the cold sweats and numbness goes out to the hands and feet. The person will feel this buzzing sensation going down the body. And then their stomach will start to make burbling sounds. It's called borborygmus. And then after the session, they're hungry again. So the Zheng Qi only returns after the Bing Qi recedes, where they don't want to occupy the same space. So the Bing Qi is something there. And that supports what Rick is saying. The presence of that causes the changes in the telomeres, the changes in the epigenes, the growth of parasites, viruses, and bacteria. It could even create the proper environment for fungi if there's a damp component, if there's a moisture component. There's a whole lot more to that in terms of the yin-yang, like wet and dry and hot and cold. And there are some things about Chinese science which is not supported in Western science. For example, cold is a thing in Chinese science. Right? You have cold inflammation, and you have excess cold and deficiency cold. Deficiency cold is a lack of circulation. Excess cold is actually in that body, and it can be stored there for a long period of time. Let's say you were a swimmer. I treated a guy, he was a SeaWorld trainer, right, of these animals, these wonderful animals. But his energy was constantly suppressed. He looked constantly tired. When you cupped him, cold water came out of his pores. And how long had that water been stored there? Who knows, So that does bring us around to the scalar energy topic. And I want to stop it and ask anybody if they have any questions before we open it up to talk scalar energy and DNA. No questions?
No, I'm pretty good. I'm just intent and listening, and just checking out this circuit.
I can ask a question.
Diagram.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so how do you relate what you just sort of talked about with the healing methods with the concept of the mind, right? If it's all mind and it's all around us and we're in
it's
it.
Not all mind.
No, from before,
Yeah, the mind is the essential because it's part of what the Chinese called the mysterious pivot. Mm-hmm. Now, the mysterious pivot, the Ling Shu, is related in Taoism to the mysterious pass, which is a part of the brain. There is a switch inside your brain, and if you hit it, it's a little bit to the right and a little bit basically center, but you need to enter the black space. If you hit that switch, your whole body can twitch all at once, and the positive voltage signal will increase, and then you guys will have the energy I have. And then you guys will transform in your life, and everything will be dynamic, and you'll feel you can go up or down. So, I could walk into a room with a patient, and I could just know they're boisterous, and I just raise my voice just like this. And then I have to be able to leave that room and go to the next room. That might be a patient who is the victim of rape or has PTSD. I have to immediately sense that, modulate myself down, because if it's too high, my extra energy now hits them and will dislodge that memory that's in their body. It will physically cause a quantum dislodging, and it will come up. And if they don't know me yet, and especially if they're female and I'm male, and their trauma was caused by a male, it could create a problem. So I have to sense that ahead. And in fact, most of the time I'm sensing things from across the clinic. And I've had multiple patients who actually asked me if I came in and was in them, and I wasn't. I was on a computer doing F-all. Who knows what I was, just working. And there was one case where I showed up to my home visit patient, and I hope to get the mother on. She's a Tai Chi student, and talk about the consciousness revival, because he was a total vegetable when I took his case on. He was thrown from a car in his teenage years because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And now he is playing, he's on iPads, and he can't really say much. He'd say mom. But he plays jokes. Like if I put a needle under the nose for reviving the consciousness, he'll actually steal that needle and hide it as a prank. But one time I walked into the house and my energy immediately dropped off. I felt like I had only a third as much energy because my spirit body actually came out of my body. And it wasn't until I walked over and started to take his vitals, I realized he was actually very sick. And what turned out was he had a large ball of mucus, because he has to be fed through a tube in his stomach. He had a large ball of mucus stuck in there that was blocking up his entire intestinal system, which is, of course, very dangerous. And all his skin was all cold. So my spirit knew that he was in danger and just kind of leaped out of my body. And it was so strong, I had to sit down because I thought I was going to pass out. And it took me about 10 minutes before I could actually start treating the guy. When you get when you hit that mysterious pass and you discover the mind within the mind, and you turn all that on, the dynamism comes out and it becomes natural. It doesn't mean it's for free, because of course you're still going to use your essence, you're still going to use your chi. But it is something that anybody can learn. And it's in the Ley Lines. That's where I picked it up from. I picked it up from the I Ching and the Ley Lines, not the Tao Te Ching, because the Tao Te Ching is a mystery school. The Lao Tzu was a mystery school. It was several men asking questions and wondering what the Tao was. They were said very specifically, you can't name it. That's not the original view that the ancient Chinese had. They knew that it was related to the stuff that was in the sky, and that there was a specific science that could be used, right? So the Lao Tzu school has come to be known as the source of Taoism. That's not true. That is one version of Taoism. Zhuangzi himself had a very different view of Taoism, and I encourage people to read his. If you're a Christian, Thomas Merton had a translation of the Tao Te Ching. I'm sorry, the Zhuangzi, which is, or many people will see as Chuang Tzu, which is still a fun read today. The guy was very clever, very, very equivocal. I hope I answered your question, Chris.
Yep. Thanks, man.
About the mysterious past. No problem.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's very cool. Thank you.
I know it is. But
I'm just digesting it. It's amazing info.
Well, that's where the presentation slideshow will be really handy. Some of these terms which have no correlation will be absolutely vital to pick up from there, so that they can augment our current work in our sciences today, because they do appear to have incredible value even to this day. Like I say, they keep finding organs that they didn't know existed, which in Chinese medicine we've known for a long time the skin is not the largest organ, right? The sanjiao is the largest organ, which on one hand it means the whole body, but it literally means the three burners. So it's clearly related to these three elixir fields. And it's also meaning the connective tissue throughout the body, including the fibrinogens inside the cells. So there's no surprise for the Chinese scientists that there's filamentary wood-like structures. In fact, you can imply, this science is so fascinating, you could apply the yin-yang, the 5 phases, the 8, and the 12, all the 12 channels, and how those correspond to the 5 elements, right to the organelles of the cell. So you have some cells, organelles, which are earth, and some are fire, and all the metal, etc., water, and how they all interact to each other. It may be slightly different as to how the whole body interacts, but they conform to the same basic principles. And this can be used in your finances. You can describe health this way. You can all sorts of stuff. Family relationships, of course, it's very Confucian to use it for family relationships. It may not be as popular. So, and that brings us, I think, we won't get into the glyphs today, but we'll do the scalar stuff because Rick really wanted to discuss the scalar stuff. So on the far right tab. All right, so I wrote this all pre-electro, magnetic cosmology for me. Obviously, I had my engineering degree. I was really fascinated by these sciences coming together. I hadn't heard anything about Wall, Thornhill, or Thunderbolts Project or anything at the time I had written this paper. And it's also not got a high level of standard as far as like citation. There are citations listed at the end. In particular, if people are interested in Professor Mayle's Scalar device, including scalar healing, or you're interested in his theories about the neutrino reactor core and how it corresponds to the expanding Earth, watch those videos. The links are at the bottom. And I checked a couple months ago. They are still out there. So I just stepped through page 1. Of course, it's just the right-hand rule. You guys are familiar with this. Page 2 goes into the sorry, I'm having trouble getting the scroll here. Well, you can see it there. So, you know, it's just flux and the right-hand rule, Lorentz force, etc. This is interesting, though, because take, for example, little things. You know, the Buddha hand, right? So where you take your thumb and your forefinger, you bring them together and you extend your hand. I'm going to teach you all right now the correct way to have that is there's first of all a position called song or sheng, where if you extend your fingers all the way, that's two extended, and then if they're relaxed, that's two relaxed. So you need to be able to snap them into place to where there's kind of this open curvature. This open curvature, by the way, is considered extremely positive in Feng Shui for the home to be on the inside of that curvature. But in this, it's just about creating a warmth that flows through. Now, if you then fold the finger and the thumb, but instead of touching them, if you take the center of the Tesla coil thumb pad that you have and hover it over the outside of the nail on your finger, and if you're aware of energy, if you guys are already conversed with your chi, you can actually feel some kind of little buzzing and going back and forth. That's the capacitive effect, and creating basically a loop where these two channels are interacting, and both of them are metal channels. So this is the correct way to do the Buddha hand, not putting the tips together, not extending the fingers all the way. You'll see all those kinds of things. You'll sometimes even see people put the pads together, and that's a different, that's kind of a Buddhist posture that is a little bit more cultural. It has nothing to do with meditation. So the electricity stuff already coming up in the body, and I do think that the pads, of course, the fingerprints, everybody's fingerprints are different, but I think that they have an approximate, I guess the citations are at the beginning of the paper. They do have an approximate Tesla coil type sensation. So the beginning of the paper, I'm just talking about rings and how electricity is flowing as you scroll down, talking about these carbon rings. We saw there was a new research paper all about these carbon rings that they're creating. It's actually kind of really cool that they're going this direction, and they're creating Vanta black, which is like uber black. Robotai is on top of all that, keeping up with black body radiation. I think it's all related. You know, I think that is the underlying message that I have for this. Okay, now it goes into transformers, just explaining the different numbers of turns creates a transformative effect, and then it goes back into DNA, because the DNA, you have these different proteins which have different size rings, and then they're all flowing together, and they're flowing in these coils, and there's a right-hand rule constantly applied if you keep going. This is just, again, showing more about the DNA. I keep going. And then, you know, of course, everybody knows the spectrum. We'll just keep going past that. More spectrum. So there's an actual image of these coils inside the body. Oh, so don't go too far there. Go back up. So I think, was it that one? I think go back up one more. Right, so here we see the inductive effect. So you see, this is how the DNA is actually coiled around these little stones, little histones. And this enables the body to store, because an inductance is a storage of current, right? A capacitor is a storage of charge. An inductor stores current, which is another way of saying it stores flux. And that magnetic field, of course, retains its structure, not forever, right? This frozen field idea is not correct. So you go down, and you can see an example of, right there, you can see the inductor. So now as these turn around each other, you create a continual alignment. So my thought here was that by creating this flux through these this DNA strand and the wrapping and the coiling, that it actually might mean that in order to create, this is a thought I had 5 years ago, right? In order to create healthy DNA, you have to electrify the body and move it in a way that causes these DNA to go from those kind of really scrunched up look that we see in a lot of scans to actually aligned the correct in X and Y fashion, how they look in a textbook. And that the magnetic fields would then be recharged by the movement of the electricity. And then after you've gone for a little, you stop doing it for a while, the magnetic field is still storing all that energy through the inductors and is then redischarging it back through the DNA. And then that explains why people who do practices, if they do it for the intention of longevity, not for, say, ascension, like a certain like a yogi, like a Kundalini yogi, then they appear to have improved vitality, however long that they're living, and some of them actually do appear to live longer too, which I think is going to work better if they have some kind of exercise as well, something that physically squeezes old fluids out of the organs, old fluids through sweat out of the pores, gets rid of chemicals and toxins, etc. Any questions on what I just said there? Right. So then the question is, and I think this is where most of you guys already have a strong opinion, is the DNA then interacting as a signal transceiver with the environment? And if so, how is it interacting with these proposed scalar magnetic waves that Mayle was showing or proposing? Now, in his experiments, he mentioned that at one time they had a doctor, a Western doctor, take and actually put chemotherapy drug on the Tesla coil, and then the patient was in a different room on the Tesla coil table, and then they just turned on the device, and the drug information was actually transferred from the medicine to the patient, and the person was cured of cancer. Now, I haven't seen any peer-reviewed studies, but I do think it's worth us actually getting a hold of a device. Now, Neil said that he knows a guy who's actually built one of these scalar wave devices. I think scalar waves are theoretically possible. Obviously, no one's proven them yet, but
Tesla found them.
In my estimation, according to the Chinese sciences, there's no end of the Hundun source of giving energy to the Taiji. The Taiji rotates, but according to the law of conservation, it gets energy from somewhere. It gets it from Hundun. But where does Hundun get it? It probably gets it back from us, right? At the very end of that infinite divisibility, this probably just resorbed back into the counter space. And then through the mysterious process the Chinese call the Zhuiyin, it then is reconverted and reconstituted back to source, right? The Chinese and the Hindus understood this a long time ago. We're just now trying to think about it. And we're like, could Big Bang be wrong? I mean, not us, but it's like, well, you've got a star that is freaking older than the Big Bang. I think probably, it's probably wrong. What are you talking about? Now they released a paper that said dark matter might be older than the Big Bang. I'm going, what?
Well,
dark matter is energy of the Birkeland current holding the galaxy together. So yeah, it is older. then yeah.
Can we pause for a second and talk about scalar waves?
Absolutely.
No, I'd love
Go ahead.
because I've thought about this a lot, of researched it a bunch, and I have questions, and like I'm just thinking, like, what do you consider like really scalar wave technology outside of the free energy idea? What does it actually physically mean to you or to anyone really? Does it so a wave is a property of something, right? Like there's no such thing as an actual wave, like something waves.
It's mathematical, right.
And then scalar just means just a measurement of magnitude. So
yeah.
I'm thinking like, so I believe, I'm just going to quickly nutshell. I feel like everything has all these shells, right? Different types of layers, and then everything interacts with these kind of bubbles and spheres of influence. And so I just feel like there's this idea of scalar wave technology. Maybe it's just something really to do with this whole quantized shell structure around every basic particle to human to cosmological to cosmic body.
Yeah, I think it's the energy that flows through all of these magnetic shells. I think that you're referring to these shells as magnetic shells on all scales, and it's this energy is connecting all of these shells together and creating them, and it's that's how the scalar technology works. Is it's following this energy that is connected to everything. Like our sun knows where every sun is in the universe.
I assume that it's taking out the idea of a vector, right? So what's happening is they're taking. Right. I think Tesla was basically, or whoever, Steinmetz and Poincaré, these guys were probably working on something which basically applied a certain level of charge to objects per se, or whatever, and observed the results, and therefore kind of just, I think, glided upon the structured shells that pre-exist, I guess, around everything that oscillates. I mean, from this whole idea of Eileen McCusick, which really is like one of the true roots, I think, that got me sort of into Thunderbolt's project. I used to follow her before that with tuning fork technology, and just seeing how that relates to the larger in terms of recursiveness of everything at the very quantum scale has the same structure as a human body in terms of, the layered chakra, the stack of chakras along a filament.
Right.
And the DNA structure being almost like a twisting Birkeland current. It's very recursive throughout at every scale. So anyway, I'm thinking like, just I have always looked into scalar wave stuff, and it really always immediately tangents to free energy devices. And I'm like, well, what is it really though? Like, does it apply to planets and interaction between planets and the moon? Anyway,
yes.
That's my train of thought.
That would be my take on it, is that essentially we're currently looking at signals as the same way that we are looking at light, is the same way we're looking at billiard balls or water out of a hose. It's like a finite amount of something that we're spraying in a direction, and it's banging around. But that doesn't appear to be how nature organizes itself at all. And it rather, the whatever it is will take on it has multiple properties, two of which appear to be wave and particle. But that's probably not the only two, right? Because what Chinese scientists are suggesting is that you could also apply the 3, the 5, the 8, etc., to where you end up with all the myriad things. And this fractal way of looking at it would imply that fractal signal, you could apply it from a star and it would have an effect on a microbe or an ant. Or it could come out of a microbe or an ant and be heard and really truly understood. And this is getting more than religious, I think. This is getting spiritual, by the star and even the entire galactic system. And there's a belief in the Gnostics, which is really fascinating, that every person has a star attached to them, and a separate star too. Like no two people are born with the same one. Of course, there are lots of astrologers and like, oh, you're Arcturus, and the next person comes in, you're Arcturus as well.
Right.
But
Popular
really,
stars.
Mine is
really,
Saturn.
the Chinese believed that people were stars that fell down to heaven. Of course, that's referring to shooting stars. But what if, in the Matrix kind of this holographic universe kind of way, people are mere, and I saw this paper a number of years ago. It was obviously science fiction, basically, but that people are basically projections from the edge of the universe. Well, what if instead of the edge of the universe, it's just from a star somewhere else that you have a similar frequency to? And in that similar frequency, you become the avatar or the mouthpiece of that higher entity. But
we are said to be microcosms of the macrocosm.
Well, I think
that your voice and every conscious voice around the universe has microbes which are attuned to it as well.
A quick note, just tangent, not a tangent, but a parallel to that. So we only know lines and tangents via points ultimately, right? Like a line or a curve, anything that's curvilinear basically, is just a string of many, many, many points. So ultimately, I think this idea of a wave, even the wave-particle duality, I know it's blasphemous because it's very staple, but I really think this is an experiment that's kind of a little bit like the Michelson-Morley thing, a little bit, not misinterpreted, but could be interpreted in many ways.
Probably.
And I honestly think, like, so the particle-wave duality might not actually be a duality. It just might be that it's ultimately these invisible so-called particles, which ultimately I maybe naively, but I feel like are akin to plasma in dark mode. It's just little particles of basically plasma, or whatever particles may be, points of information as plasma.
I would say that you have to be correct in that also they would be lots of different things that belong to. So there's going to be solid, and gaseous and fluid properties, all the different properties.
Modalities, like ice and water. Yep, totally.
Yeah, all the different phases must be contained in the information. I think it's really fascinating. They just discovered that water is will suddenly create hydrogen peroxide. There's got to be some kind of I don't know if you want to call it intelligence or wisdom, where nature self-mitigates that kind of thing and creates that kind of balance. Because in our current view is that unless it's radioactive, it would basically just want to exist how it wants to exist in nature. You know, if we find salt, we're like, oh yeah, salt loves to be salt because it likes to be a cube. But this is suggesting that, you know, it's behaving like a cube because that's the field it's interacting it. But in space, it might be different, right? Just as in the ocean, it's different. You know,
here's a far tangent. So McKenna talking about this giant elf growing into our dimension, like a fungus, like a mushroom, basically.
That is a giant tangent.
It is, but the idea that we are grown of Earth, so the Earth peoples, you know, and the idea that of the true, like the Zen masters, of the fact that we are everything, we do all this. We are ultimately, the reason we exist is because we keep tricking ourselves into the deeper and deeper dream, because the Godhead is ultimately never discoverable. Like the fire cannot burn the fire, right. The knife cannot cut the knife, right? So you take that principle and you realize, no, like if you had the power, if you were the God, you dream these ultimate fantasies to the point where you could no longer tell if you were dreaming or awake, right? And that, yeah. So I feel just the recursive fractal that we see in numbers and geometry really relate to metaphysics and even astrology to some degree.
You know, we call it metaphysics, but it's actually just that. Really, if you get down to it, numerology is just physics, because it's not really a side bit. Because the meta would imply is some kind of side bit. It's absolutely vital, and I don't mean that in a mathematics is the language of God kind of authority of the mathematician, but I do mean it in and not in a woo meaning either, but that the numbers have in them the key to understanding and the key to the wisdom. Yet they are not the key, the wisdom itself.
If you'll allow a final point, yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Go ahead, yeah.
No, the numbers often are are underestimated because letters and numbers are geometry. They're circles and
Right.
tetrahedrons and lines, and especially with calligraphy in multiple languages. I speak a couple of languages, and I can a little bit of Japanese, a little bit of Arabic, and you see the recursiveness through many different languages that once I thought as a kid, I was like, no, all languages are really, really different, but they're actually really not. There are about 8,000 phonemes, and really ultimately it's these little bits of triplets and I'm a musician, so when you study music theory, you're like, holy shit, excuse my language, it's all really like this big symphony, the organs, etc.
And it conforms with this one science, of which the Chinese had just a large part to play, but it's much larger than them. It's much larger than everything else. If you take the totality of the Bagua and the 8 principles that they called, of course, things like heaven and rain river and mountain. Well, you can look at it in terms of the main principles of study, the main scientific principles: causality, flux or evolution, relativity, conservation, vibration, rotation, polarity, and resonance. And so each of those, you can spend an entire lifetime. An entire society can be devoted. Some of those entire religions have been devoted to, say, cause and effect, right? Karma. The relativity people, they're big. They have a lot of power right now. There's no denying the power of relativity over our society right now. But it's only one of these 8 principles, and they're always interacting with each other, and there's always more to know. The law of conservation is saying that, everything that's ever been, will ever be, is here in the now. And it's in some form or another, or maybe in some place or another. But it's also implying that there's an infinite number of numbers between the infinite numbers, and in each infinite gap created in an infinitesimal fraction, there's an infinite set of numbers inside of those. So we don't have a limit as to what we can derive, but we haven't yet, I think, understood as a species. This is a thing that I feel like I picked up an influence from this Bhagavad Gita translation, that if you're on Earth, you're here to understand the number system pertaining to your humanity, which is this Fibonacci sequence and the number 10, of course. And then we have a few numbers that we also like. We like 4 and we like 7. But these have been defining our human experience from our religion and our spirituality, our medicine, our technology, and our music, all ever since we first observed the breakdown of the central heaven man god he fell.
The polar configuration.
He lost, yes. But you say it that way, but remember, from their perspective, this was a living being. And to us, it's a configuration, an alignment of a few random bodies in the entire cosmos. But for them, it was the above God. And the above God fell. And the fertility god, he was the fertility god who seeded himself. He was so good at fertility, he seeded himself in his own mother, who was his wife, who became his daughter, and he became his own son. That cosmology there is so all-encompassing. And then as it evolved, and breaking into these parts, first they have the separations of then the Epic of Gilgamesh, the separations of heaven and earth, and the square and circle motif are all around the world. So all around the world, people were seeing heaven and earth separate. And the effect that has had on, say, interaction between male and female, between sovereign and tax citizen, a boss and employee. The entire dichotomy that is created. I'm not saying we can prove that it didn't exist prior to XYZ, but when we see that time had a certain start, it seems to indicate that prior to that, people had a mode of being which was on a much more unified strata. There is a definite start, as far as anthropology is concerned, there is a definite date to the start of war. And so that means that we haven't yet really mastered whatever it is we're learning on this planet. Now, that doesn't mean that, this book, of course, this yogi, using the Gita, he was saying these other planets around us were new heavens and hells. I can't say that. I don't know, that there are other ones. But I do feel that the life sciences, we may never get to even Polaris or Sirius A, but we can, through the life sciences, really start to master our lives and help each other and become what the Chinese, they said, they called the complete person, the Zhenren.
Well, the only way we're going to get to those stars is if we do it slowly, a slow type of colonization.
Yes.
That's totally the only way, because if I firmly believe that once we get up to, really, really fast speeds, they're going to find that these little dust particles and it's just going to tear your ship apart.
Oh,
no matter totally what kind of deflectors or kind of shielding that you think you can put on them, it's not going to protect it.
How would you like to be going near the speed of light and you need to change your tire? I mean, you can't exactly stop immediately. And what if something new pops in the way? And there's all these planets that are roving around, these exoplanets that are darker than charcoal, because we don't yet understand the full gravity of the liquid metallic hydrogen model. And I don't think even Robitaille has, in my estimation, the laws of life are applicable on all of the scales. So very likely, a planetoid born of a star, whether it's a large star or small, it doesn't matter that much to me at this stage of thinking. It grows up into a rocky planet, grows up into a gas planet, which grows up into a star, and then on up and up and up. And so what if they're not part of a flux currently? Well, what do we see in the body when the follicle is not currently being developed? It's just hanging out. You don't think about it until it emerges and possibly becomes fertilized. But there could be tons of these darker than charcoal exoplanets and protostars that aren't currently on. Right? Their transistors are off, flying all over the place. This could be everywhere. And how could we know before you get there? And so to measure something, you got to go across the river, and somebody's got to take the string over there. You can't just blindly shoot it over. You got to know the path, and that's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap either. But I want to go there.
Yeah, and it's going to take a long time.
It's going to be worthy. It's going to be a worthy journey. But we got to make sure that we take care of our planet and take care of each other. And I think that these sciences will help, because they require a balanced equation. If I had anything to impart, there is a book, Stone Monkey, Alternative Chinese Scientific Approach, by Bruce Holbrook. And I definitely recommend that book, Stone Monkey. He spends a lot of time on spectroscopy.
Well, I think Mr. Spock is going to be the way forward. That logic is going to have to lead the road, so to speak. A lot more people are going to have to become a lot more logical in their thinking before we can really move forward.
Yes, but the question is, now for the Chinese, you see in the West, how do we try to raise IQ? We try to force people to memorize stuff. But IQ has nothing to do with memorization, right? According to the Chinese, you would nourish the yin to promote the yang. So if you want more of intellect, you have to nourish the heart and the spirit and the soul. So we can't abandon funding of the arts and humanities and the music. We absolutely need those to keep raising people out. And besides, we know that they help people. We know that they help people in the hospital. We know that they help people with end of life situations. I'm not discounting all the metal aspect of our society because metal is important, but it's only one of the 5 phases, and there's so much more that we have to discover about ourselves before we could even imagine colonizing Mars, or what have you. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a little base there. I think it's better to get a base on the moon first. But I feel like the ancient sciences, they can teach us the longevity that we're going to need. When you can create, speaking of scalar waves, I have a scalar wave story for you. I have a friend. He has 2 really fantastic stories. I'll just share one. His master was the triad guy who would have been the one who actually had to kill Bruce Lee if they had decided to kill Bruce Lee. He's a very fascinating guy. He studies how to take rattlesnake poisons and various venoms of snakes to become immune. So he uses toxins to create healing. It's that whole yin and the yang thing. And anyways, he was in China and he was climbing one of the temples. There's a whole lot of temples on Wudong Mountain. He was climbing and he heard this bell, just clear as could be. It was like as if it was right next to him. But he kept climbing and there never appeared this bell. And he kept hearing it for the longest time. And then finally he got all the way to the top. It seemed like miles. And he came across a monk who was just finishing up and was leaving. He's like, "Hey, were you ringing that bell?" He's like, "Yeah." And he brings him over and he shows him this bell. And it's made of bronze. But the shape of it was such that when he struck it, it made the same amount of noise right next to the bell as he heard all the way down the path. And he said, "How is this? Tell me about this bell." He says, "We don't know. It's been here so long that the mystery of it, it's been gone. Nobody knows how it was made and what material it was made from. This is some kind of alloy, right?" Again, systematic chemistry. They would compound different materials, mix them together with different heats, and see what happened, and then they would discover these new materials. And then they figured out how to shape them and use them and to do magnificent things with them. I have no reason to disbelieve his story because of the earnestness of which he said it, and also the fact that I know there are mysterious things at Wudong Mountain. There's a very famous building there that to this day produces ball lightning, and it will make the building glow in very peculiar ways when storms go by. And we know that Wudong itself must be special for 2 reasons. One, all the mountains appear to face towards the center. So it may be that it was the product of some ancient cataclysm in which they still worship Junwu, Jun meaning lightning. So the lightning god there, or the thunder god, you could say, Legong. And 2, the water table is really fascinating at Wudong Mountain. There are these 4 wells. If you drop a stone into one, the ripple will appear at one of the other wells far away, as in the water table is still pure there. And so there's a lot of really fascinating mysteries at Wudong. And I would not be surprised that if they're on the ones, I think there's almost 1,000 temples there altogether, certainly over 100, that there's this bell. And I hope one day to go and manifest it, find it for myself and to ring it.
In short, is it fair to say that the kind of deduction of all of this is that we live in this world where electricity essentially can change physical parameters? At the very
probably. We've talked about that on the show several times, where I think most of us would come to the agreement, however we like to see things, that electromagnetism has different behaviors on different scales. in almost different kind of like ranges, and then weird properties start showing, like superconductivity or
Transmutation.
or transmutation, all sorts of different things. My
Well, I'm not sure if. Sorry, Rain. One sec. I'm
my
not
Bluetooth
sure.
is starting to die, so I'm gonna turn it off, and then maybe give me a second.
Okay. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Chris, but there is a story, and I'm pretty sure it's true, and it's documented that power lines fell. I think it was in Quebec, Canada, and they didn't turn the power off for a good long time. When they went to repair the lines, they found that the power that was turned on, coursing through the stumps that had been cut for the power lines, turned those stumps into stone.
Is that where's you put that in Discord? Because I gotta see that. Yeah. I mean, see, that's of course. I mean,
I can't remember where I'll try and dig it up.
That's a
I
pretty
can't remember
hefty,
where I heard it.
Yeah, those are the important findings. I mean, the comets, the hexagonal craters. Honestly, actually, Ramon, you mentioned Kirlian energy fields around people and things by implying voltage, induction, and creating, essentially basically seeing every strand of Birkeland current at an exponential size or exponential magnitude emanating from the smallest object that we can see, right? So like the skin or the core of the apple.
I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, so sorry. So funny. So you didn't hear any of what I just said?
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's totally good. It's my bad.
My Bluetooth started to die, and it interferes with as I turn it off. So I apologize. Go ahead.
No problem. I'll repeat it. It was just a quick one about, you mentioned Kirlian aura photography, energy field photography, right? At some point a little bit earlier, and there's very little data on it online, but it really seems interesting because you induce charge in an object, basically a body or a slice of fruit or whatever, and you essentially are able to see the filamentary structure of the Birkeland current, in every scale of essentially scalar magnitude, emanating from whatever object you're looking at to wherever the photo's edge is. Essentially, you're seeing the sphere of influence. Yeah.
I once saw an interesting set of images that pertain to men and women. And they had one where the two people loved each other and the lines went right to each other. And then they had one where the man was interested sexually in the woman, but she was not interested in him. And her lines came out of her hand and then went whoop, up north and south. And his came west towards hers and then tried to find a way towards and just couldn't and was repelled and then went north and south. But first tried to find a way through the weak field lines. Right. I thought that was really fascinating. Yeah. It was extremely poignant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Actually, what Rick was talking about was these lightning bolts turning tree stumps into rocks, like instant petrification.
Oh yeah.
No, it wasn't lightning bolts. It was.
No, it was
the power lines had fallen down.
My bad. Lightning bolt. Yeah, you see how much Thunderbolts project I watch. The thunderbolts of the gods came down and rendered them to stone.
There are, Chris, by the way, previous episodes where we've done the glyphs. I was only going to cover glyphs because Neil loves the Chinese glyphs so much and what they do. I recommend the previous episodes that we had done, or just, obviously you can read the papers,
Oh, no, I don't know if you know, I guess I stumbled on the channel a while ago. I've watched a lot of the videos, so I'm just catching up on everything. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, the glyphs are really fantastic because
my God, yeah.
They really tell just an amazing story. And the Chinese, again, they would not find Peter's work to be fringe or confusing at all, they would fully believe in this transmutative power of Tao to convert. Like this crab. I mean, they would actually revere. They would want to buy that because it would have like a special spiritual significance.
Exactly. I mean, I do love
Well,
the
it was
whole.
touched by
Yeah.
God, right? So
Right, exactly.
I mean, the correlation with Clash of the Titans, Medusa, Perseus, Zeus, this whole kind of mythological story. I was telling Rick that I think that all the media, besides it being, whatever, controlled to a point, well, very controlled, but recursively tells the story of catastrophism over and over and over. Like it integrates like all these different conspiratorial plot lines in order to tell really the destruction of Earth and the heroes that saved it via, reinterpreting mythology. But we're sitting here trying to use the same types of tools to like interpret physics and progress and, healing.
yeah, it might have been Peter Mungo Job that I heard him mention this. That's why I'm going through this video.
Mentioned which thing?
Petrification.
Petrification of tree stump.
Yeah, that was him. That was him talking about the power lines, and I still haven't found the exact like proof, like a local story or anything like that. I've only found it from him. I've cited it before, but I'm hesitant to get 100% behind it because I just would like independent verification. But I have no reason to suspect it isn't real. And if you guys haven't seen his DVD, the 1491 Melbourne Comet, I definitely recommend buying that one. And it's on Stickman on Stone, or
Okay.
I think it's on Stickman on Stone, but it's definitely on his site. He has a catastrophe page. You can order things from there. That one's amazing because the comet split, and part of it crashed into the water and created a 240-foot mega tsunami, and then the other part airbursted. And he actually shows you a stump that is on the beach in Melbourne today, near to Melbourne, like south of it, right? And you can tell which part. You can see where the electricity went along, and there's still remnants of wood that looks fresh, but it's turned kind of hard, and then there's burned, like charcoalized wood. It's fantastic. It's the most amazing stump, petrified stump I've ever seen, and it was there on the beach. It's and the correlation to the 1491 is confirmed with Korean astronomy dates. So I feel it's very compelling, and the Aborigines are the ones that kind of told the story first. So it's like dual, and then he finds this stump. It's fantastic.
The concept exists in our culture, turn to stone, freeze.
Yeah.
This idea exists, but people don't make the connection really ultimately.
Yeah, isn't that weird? I mean, there's all sorts of things like that in our culture. There's a lot of sayings that we have, and when you stop, when you think about them, you're like scratching your head, like, how could that not be related?
It's got to. It's got to. I mean, it's
got to.
I think okay, here's a thought that I have, which is that we think that kind of, or we feel generally, because I guess of our culture currently, or the voltage maybe, that languages, philosophy, sciences, skills, all these things exist separate from the universe, and further that humans exist separate from the earth, and further the earth exists separate from the planets. You know what I mean? But really, people forget that the entire hemisphere comes to a tiny point in your eye. All of it. All the houses, the stars, the planets, everything comes to one tiny little point in your eye and focuses. And when it's not focused, it's basically just awash in white light. there's this idea of the fact that we exist at all, or consciousness at all, that like what even is seeing? What is seeing? You know, what is this idea of interpreting space or your surroundings in any visual way? So I feel like there's this correlation between like thought and, you know, electric physical interactions, as we're talking about in terms of scalar waves, in terms of healing, static charge, etc. Like we seem to think like us and something else, but maybe
Right.
our thought branches off. Well, not maybe, I really think it does. Like just like the neurons get smaller and smaller, our thoughts get smaller and smaller. That's that whole novelty machine sucking in energy, getting more and more complex, more and more media, more and more content,
Right.
and the more we get, the more we want. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is the tree that you were talking about with Peter Mungo Jap Raymond. It's in Lesbos, and it says here the tree was turned to solid stone whilst it still pointed to the heavens.
That's not the one I was talking about. That's a different one, but it's
Oh.
fantastic. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
And
I mean, he's got this video, instant fossilization. It's chock full of stuff. I've watched it before.
yeah,
It's amazing.
no, it's a great video. But I get the other one because it's you know, first of all, it's him. It's not put out by Thunderbolts Project, and so it supports local. You know,
What's it called?
you know, go to his website, which gosh, it's I always get him in the Randall Carlson ones. Just type into Google the Peter Mungo Jep catastrophes, and his website will come up. And then under videos, you have to scroll Mungo Flicks. That's it. Go to the Mungo Flicks. And it's not really streaming. I mean, there's some videos, but then I can't see because you zoomed out. But find the
Sorry, I'll zoom back in.
That's okay. Just the menu. There's somewhere it says DVDs, electric geology videos, maybe. Oh no, there's ancient destructions videos. Yeah. And then scroll down. I mean, all these are good too, but I just really love the Greenland older entries. Maybe this website's changed, or we're on the. Oh man. Yeah, keep going to older. Yeah, so now we're into the destructions. So there's the Baalbek ones, which are really good. Mega Tsunami, there's Melbourne. It's really not 1500, it's actually 1491. But anyways, that's a really great DVD. You get a chance to buy it. I feel like I got mine on Stickman on Stone, but I'm not 100% sure. I might have ordered it from the site. I don't remember. But his ancient destruction stuff is pretty cool. I mean, you know, it's low whatever I don't know what you want to say, low production, you know, but it's really fun. He goes to all the different sites, and I think he's very affable. Of course, I have a soft spot for English documentary people.
I love his accent. No shit.
Yeah,
I love it.
Too right, mate.
He was petrified. Petrified, mate.
He's petrified.
He's petrified. I love it. I think he's brilliant. And
Yeah.
He's either that or he's totally a quack. But I've fallen out on the side of he's brilliant.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's picked up on something and understood it and how it works.
Yeah.
And how it's working at an atomic level, changing
it's like a good
biomatter
song.
into solid stone. That's a transmutation event.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I tell you, Chris, I think you're going to fit in super awesome here because you love talking about the good stuff, like, you know, the natural natural science, the natural philosophy, as it was meant to really be talked about. You know, the meaning of what does it mean? Like you were talking about, what does it mean to see? You know, what is the very nature of light, etc.
I've realized it's the part of me that wants to not wants novelty. You know, I've had a very experiential life. I'm almost 40. I've had a lot of experience in my life. I grew up in Lebanon during the war. I went to Baalbek, like, and yeah. So I've seen a lot of crazy shit, and I feel like at this point, I want to help kind of guide people in ways that I've seen come to fruition for me, which is the fact that once you realize, like, the point here is to experience. Actually, Shockwave is so Rick. I've just been like cooking here in the headphones for 2 hours just listening to this. So forgive me if I'm a little bit like if I fumble over my words. But this whole connection of being able to use the mind and the body to achieve things in life. This is something that is missing from our culture. And our culture is this magnetic resonance. You know, we have so much to give and so few ways to kind of achieve it in this difficult system. But also, the difficult system is because this planet wants to become a star. It wants to end in this glorious boom of like Alan Watts used to say, like it's this gorgeous mechanism of destruction, and you're like holding on for dear life, you know. And I love that about EU, because it gives Electric Universe gave me that ability to kind of put all these weird conspiracies and ideas and fears behind me and say, no, I'm completely connected to everything instantaneously. I might not be able to go to stars, but I know that I'm connected to stars. I'm connected to planets.
You know, it's funny. Not that I'm a big fan of pollution. I'm not at all a fan of pollution. I'm kind of a Nazi about not, you know, people not littering on the paths and stuff. But in a lot of ways, mankind is doing some favors, putting carbon back into the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is actually getting really thin with carbon because the plants have been so successful for so long. There's so much oxygen, and so your point is resonating really well. It's like, yeah, we do things that are stupid, but we also
actually,
we solve a
Raymond,
lot of
I'd like
problems.
to, I'd
We
like
solve
to,
a lot of problems.
yeah, we have, but I'd like to make a point about the oxygen levels. When I was young, the oxygen levels were at 23%. They are down to 20 now. If you go and Google it, you'll find that they're saying the oxygen content in the air is 20% now. When I was young, it was 23%.
I'm not saying that there's no problem. I'm just saying.
No, I'm just saying there's less than there was. That's
They're very well could be. I have no reason to doubt you.
well, the cutting of the rainforests, and I think these spray these chemical sprays that they're putting out of the back of the airplanes, they're landing on the leaves, and they're putting a cover on the leaves, and it's preventing photosynthesis, and it's, you know, stopping oxygen production or slowing it down.
But as far as us, like, you know, using coal or natural gas, I no longer have any fear that that's the problem. I think the problem is toxicity, is when you create, because I'm focusing on, just like the Chinese scientists, on what is healthy for us and the animals and the forests. Don't create toxicity, because what nature is always trying to do is transform toxicity. So if it's a circuit, if all of it's one big circuit, going back to my circuit design, if you overload the circuit, how can it transform? Because at the end of the cycle, there's too much of the negative voltage, right? And you're trying to force the system to transform. How quickly can it transform? Earth is magnificent, but I suspect we can gum it up. And if you gum it up, then we're not going to do well.
Yeah, if the circuit is blocked, you're not going to be able to. It's not going to be able to work properly.
Right.
Then you're in,
and it takes time for it to clear
deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
Can
really
I jump in here for a second? Show my true, like, activist bone. So
Yeah.
like, because I'm all about this, I'm not all about the environment. I love the environment. I love Earth. I love this idea of protecting the planet. But at the same time, it's always six of one, half a dozen of the other. Like you need plastic and you need silicone and you need all these things for us to achieve these greater things. It's really a psychological thing. The culture is hell bent on success and money and goals and pushing further and further. Therefore, it's going to eat up resources. Even if a small group of people understand that, generally the 80%, 85% culture is going to say, no, like we're hell bent on success, therefore adapt and eat, eat up the resources, create plastics, create new materials, create things that we've never even seen before. Like once carbon fiber becomes cheap, which it will be soon, or carbon nanotubes, once that becomes like the norm, which everything becomes the norm. Everything becomes premium. Look at coffee. Coffee was like just all over the place. Everything is premium coffee now, from the shittiest deli to like the highest end, like barista shit in Soho. It's the same, like science will ultimately go there. So anyway, I'm talking a lot about a lot of different things, but more so just that, like you need the plastic to get the rubber suit to go save the dolphin. you know
Yeah.
So-
Kind of goes round and round, doesn't it?
right, but mostly it's there. Like if you look at it from the outside and you say, wait, it's there for me to experience making plastic and also saving a dolphin. You go out, I guess, with the best of both worlds.
So
Yeah, I mean,
you did see this. You saw this image of a Russian rocket launch, right?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you had seen this before.
Yeah, that video, is so funny. It was such a mystery when it first
Right.
happened, and then a lot of people still weren't happy, and I'm not 100% happy with their explanation. But I think it's beautiful. I mean, not everything that humans do is awful, and there's this terrible idea out there, and what it leads to. And I've seen some people that I respect, um, whose names are in papers that you were looking at today, who have said what I consider to be atrocious ideas of purging and getting rid of most of the people. And I'm like, that is not the secret of the science. That's not what the science is teaching us. There is something that can be done to where we can stop behaving like the catastrophes just happened, and start behaving with some wisdom. And if anything, Tesla was all about increasing human momentum and human energy. Well, more people is more energy. Now is everybody in a state where they're being completely useful right now? No, that's definitely not the case.
Well,
But
I sorry.
but their children.
This image just blows me away. Pinned by
Oh, isn't
Laura
it
Osborne
lovely?
on witchcraft, magic symbols, Norse symbols, and Nordic symbols. Like
Yeah.
Squatter Man, the polar configuration. I
Yep.
see it all there,
Oh
man.
my God! Come on,
It's like
tell me what you
wow.
see. Top.
Well,
Yeah. They're
the
You
top
notice
is the top is Saturn, and those are thunderbolts of the gods. Those
those
are
are
the
Bluetooth
tridents.
symbols. That's the symbol for Bluetooth on your phone and your laptop.
yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, the ones in the middle,
Oh,
or the
The
second
top
row.
right,
funny.
second row, like middle and right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the
that's
symbol for,
amazing.
yeah, that's the connected Bluetooth symbol. I mean, like honestly, it's definitely baked in either intentionally or because it's baked into our DNA, and we're going to
Well,
tell these stories that are like the thunderbolts leaving a Lichtenberg figure in the ground, which is an
It could
exact
be both.
mirror.
look at row 3, right hand side, Squatter Man. Inside a Squatter Man on the side, laying on its side
Yeah.
is like what? That's
If
obviously the Taurus, right?
there's so many other things too, like I keep going back to this video, but bottom right corner of the image is on the left. That's like the scarab as well. It's all this Egyptian, the scarab and the jackal, and then You know, I think who was talking about it? I think Kronos was on at one point, and he was talking about how there was this the electromagnetic circuit of ancient Egypt. Have you guys ever talked about Ptah and the Jed pillar
Oh
and the
yeah.
Wa scepter?
Definitely.
And
Sean
that's
was
crazy.
right in that, giving us all kinds of good
Yeah,
information.
Yeah,
I
that's
can't
cool.
believe that he didn't make it tonight. I thought maybe he's working.
Probably is.
Yeah, that's too bad. I was hoping he would chime in with some Egyptian stuff. You know, he might have even known more about Egyptian blue and would be able to add to it.
You know, I got Jupiter and Saturn in view right now.
Oh, nice.
I'm gonna go live after
Hey,
this.
Sweet.
buddy,
I'll join you.
Are you there, buddy? I'm not sure if Buddy's there. I'll message him. What I want him, you know, because Neil has been not feeling well, I guess.
Yeah.
I want Buddy
Yeah.
to maybe carve this up and you know,
Put it out there.
take out the time that I was disconnected and take out the front and then get it up, because well, I mean, we could let Neil do it, but it might take a long time, and you had promised those people that it was going to get up, and I don't want them to have to wait too long.
Right. Well, it'll come when it comes. I'm not too worried about that, and I'm sure Neil's not worried about it. But I would like to point out one thing. The sound setup that you're using now is far, far better quality than your Bluetooth.
Well, yeah, but the problem is if I started this way and the children came down the stairs, you would hear absolutely everything that they did.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So the speakers, yeah, the I'm just on speakerphone. Isn't that funny? The speaker, but again, any noise that's in this room, you're gonna pick it up if I use it
Gets
that way.
picked right up. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
get
Mac
you.
stuff does. Ramon, I want to say, man, like really excellent level of knowledge and presentation. Thank you for all of that. It was a lot of good, juicy stuff that I really haven't. Like, I mean, I've heard a lot, but I haven't like heard it put together like that. It was really great.
Well, no problem. If you end up having any questions about the eight laws and their interactions or anything like that, and it's my requirement on this planet to answer anything and everything about those principles and to put them in such a succinct manner for everybody.
Awesome.
The presentation that I shared, the energetic technologies slideshow, it does answer quite a few questions, though. It doesn't go into the plasma glyphs, obviously, because that was for a health conference, or it was a personal development day, and they had asked me to come in, and pretty funny, it was no men at all, and I was like, "What? Do the men working at this college not need to develop themselves? Like, what the hell is going on around here?" You know. And
Wait
then
a
another funny,
second. Sorry,
another.
Ray.
Go ahead.
Why is
Oh,
copper associated with Venus in this image? Go ahead. Sorry. Finish your thought.
I don't know. That's kind of weird. And then another funny thing is that they were giving out these Asian themed gifts to the ladies, right? And one of them was like a Buddha bust, and she was like, so and so, and she called her. She was like, I don't know what it is, but you could use it as a doorstop or maybe a weapon. I was like, no, you cannot use the Buddha's head as a weapon. I was like, oh my god.
Oh my God!
It's
You're
like,
gonna beat
oh,
somebody
Oh,
over the
wow.
head
yeah.
with Buddha?
With Buddha, I was like, oh, I was like, just saying that. Oh my god, do you know how bad that is? Yeah, I'm gonna like I'm a martial artist, so I'm all about weaponry, but and the son of heaven is okay with you defending yourself, but it's another thing to take the image of the son of heaven and then beat somebody with it in your mind. I was
I
like,
know, right?
oh my god.
I think some people find certain acts only fun if they're ritualistic.
Maybe. I don't think she knew quite like that it was a real religious item, but
Right.
there is a funny thing in uh, Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism. Nichiren himself said that the sutras predicted if you're doing it right, that your enemies will come and beat you with the sixth scroll of the Lotus Sutra. And he himself, he claimed, I don't, obviously no one was there to fact check him, but he claimed that the Zen Buddhists got so mad at him that they beat him with his, when they came into his house and raided it, that they picked up his scroll of the Lotus Sutra and started to beat him with it. And so he wrote these letters where he profoundly thanked them for exercising his bad karma. And when they tried to have him beheaded, a comet went by or a meteor or whatever, and it was so bright it scared the samurai off. And so he felt he was enlightened, so he was like really thankful. Of course, he kept berating the Zen Buddhists all the time, right? And the Pure Land Buddhists, and he pissed off a lot of people, but they never tried to kill him. And eventually, they asked him to come in and testify about all the disasters that were happening to the country because he had predicted 6 out of the 7. And he said the next one is going to be an invasion. And sure enough, they didn't hire him and put him in charge of Buddhism in the country. And so he retired feeling, that he had done his best. And not that long after, they were invaded. So all the 7 disasters befell. So he felt very justified in his belief system. Let's just say.
Great story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Man, I'm looking at all these symbols, but man, like just the whole emoji thing and the way we live now, just fractally broken apart, even smaller and smaller. I was going to say earlier, Ramon, the idea of like that we are the Godhead forever running away from ourselves, right? And the idea that if you build bigger and bigger telescopes, the universe is literally just going to get bigger and further away. And if you get a bigger Hadron Collider, you're basically going to break more particles apart till basically the universe will constantly hide itself from you. So there is no ultimate truth except
Right.
for acceptance. And
if you only use deduction, you can't because that isn't the Tai Chi, right? You have to have induction and deduction. You have to combine the two. Otherwise, it's not really science. It's just kind of obsession. It's like somebody who's carving cadavers because they want to play with entrails, It's just constant obsession with dissecting and dissecting and that person eventually separates from their own reality and they become obsessed with this dead existence. And the inductive scientist lives in a polar configuration of everything working together, and including they might hate their enemy, but they appreciate their enemy, right? Like I don't like people who don't like me, but I kind of like that they don't like me because then when I succeed, I have somebody, to have beaten. They give me fire.
okay,
It's
right. Yeah.
let it charge you rather than turn you into being angry about it. Like you already don't like them, so why be angry about it? I mean,
why focus on that?
right? Why focus on it? Because whatever you focus on expands. So instead, if somebody makes you angry, then you can go pump iron better, or you can go box better. But if when you're boxing, you focus on the hatred and anger, you just end up getting injured. But if you're boxing and you don't think about it, but it's in there, the emotion is there, so there's power, but there's no like you're not putting their face on the bag and and like I'm gonna get them, and then that energy it transforms. You have a great sweat, great workout. It's so good for you. It's so much better than hating the person.
Well, it looks like our Bluetooth symbol there is combination of peace and healing. I don't think so.
It is interesting that you bring that around, because I was thinking earlier, the scalar waves, the connection of everything, right? So essentially from the point in the iris where the light, the lens basically in the eye, where all space enters as a visual, whatever visual is, whatever matter is. Like I've listened to a lot of Thunderbolt's project. I got to that. There was what is the matter, or what the what the matter is, or whatever. That was a wonderful talk by. I'm totally spacing on his name right now, so forgive me. But uh, he was talking about, like, what do we really know what matter is? Do we know what we're even seeing? How do we even interpret that? Like you were saying, whereas the DNA is a receptor of our surroundings. So sorry, that was a long-winded way to talk about Eileen McCusick's biofield, and essentially the idea the idea that information is stored outside the body forever, like all incidences, all events, and all information in the universe is in the universe, but in our 6 foot, 30 foot, morphogenic, or like our sphere of influence, our domain, our our electromagnetic domain, all our experience from the day we were born till now oscillates outwards from the center of probably, I don't know, I don't think probably a combination of all the chakra points, or the center of our larger torus field. But anyway, what do you think about the idea of information existing outside the body? I mean,
Well, I think information, it's like saying truth is, or love is, or God is. I think information is
memories maybe is a better word.
Well, I'm pretty
it's
sure
data.
it.
Data
I'm
is
pretty-
data. I don't care when it's in the forward or in the backward.
I'm pretty sure it's out there, and we call it consciousness.
But like, and maybe in a physical tie-in to like let's say you have a whiff of something walking down the street, and you remember walking with your brother when you're 5 years old down a street in some countryside. You know what I mean? You get that very vivid, very deep memory. The science right now, if you look that up, says basically it's in the brain. It's in the brain. I'm like, is it really though? Or are you conjuring up this kind of field modality that surrounds you all the time, and you remember basically everything ever, or you can access? You don't remember everything. You can access pretty much everything.
If your genetic code allows your brain to work like that, then yeah, you can. There are people out there that can do that, or can do certain things that they can focus on, and just like like remote viewing, or not telekinesis, but telekinetics, things like
telepathy.
that.
Yeah, I know.
Telepathy.
Well, what I was going to say is, what if it's as simple as a skill? Like, you have to learn a skill, right? To learn how to play guitar, for example, you first don't know how to do it at all, and then you sort of know how to do it, and then you do it. And
Unlock your own DNA. Okay, yeah, I can see that.
so maybe what if this idea of the 100th monkey effect, which I don't necessarily believe in the way it's portrayed, but what if it's not the masses decide. It's a small energetic pocket that actually leads the larger discharge paradigm that moves through the larger current, the 80-90% field. What if that's what is the conjoining of hearts, minds, thoughts, intensely thought about, intensely passionate, forging the new concept, forging ahead, and blazing this new like plasma discharge, seething and creating, the groundswell that's talked about. Maybe it's more of a mind thing. Maybe it's more of a thought thing, an information thing. That's why I'm saying, if information exists on the outside of the body, and you just tell people, you're like, hey man, information's actually not all stored in your brain, which seems really unreasonable, but it's actually stored outside your body, and the brain actually receives it in this way that you've heard, crackpot astrologers tell you about. But in fact, it's actually real physical science. You tell that to 100 people, then 1,000 people, then 10,000, then it becomes a reality where you can access every memory. It's not like it's not an alien from Sirius B who comes and says, hey, now you're now
or
you're
an
ascended.
or an entity from another dimension
Yeah, an
beaming
elf saying like, now
hatred
you're
into your
ascended.
mind. But
Yeah, like
but that
took me
hate.
25 years to play guitar and I still suck. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's a
but
lifelong, like Electric Universe is a lifelong thing. It's not a thing you do, you like, it's not like a door you go through and that's it, like Electric Universe. You know, it's a lifelong, it's a system by which we live. Anyway,
right.
sorry. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, but that hate that we experience, I don't think it's generated by us. I think it's a vibration that comes into us and we pick up on it and go with it. I think
I think you can do. I think it can be both.
maybe a little bit of both, yeah.
There
But
is
but those
in
flashes of hatred, or like you're walking down the street and you see somebody trip and you say to yourself, "Oh, I wish he fell on his face." You know, things like that. That
But if you
those
say like, what
flashes
if
are.
I fell on my face and I actually hurt myself, or my mother fell on her face and she hurt herself? Would I feel good or bad? It's a multidimensional level of thinking that the media hates. The media
Yeah,
wants you to be black and white, red dress,
yeah.
blue dress, but
This
there is a
side, that
spectrum
side.
of ideas, right? There's a spectrum of thoughts. That's what the new sciences are. The new sciences are more complicated. They're multidimensional. You have to know a lot of things in order to survive in this reality. You can, I mean, the same way you can't ignore your body, and the healing that you talked about, Ramon, is like so brilliant, and like that's really the future science. You know, healing through electricity and voltage, and the teeth and the circuitry of the teeth going down to the toe, and you know, like the crazy way that yeah, just you know, how chemistry is actually electrochemistry or electrobiology, or a completely new science. Somebody has to say it for it to happen. That's the magic that people talk about happening. All it is somebody saying it and then three other people agreeing. And then those three people telling two other people and then telling their kids. And 4 generations later, the paradigm has shifted. It's not mysterious, actually. Like, I think, in fact, the powers that be probably have algorithms that dictate exactly what I'm talking about in like great spreadsheets about all of reality and how it behaves based on certain types of phrases and etymology and like stories, or they test screenplays like this probably in songs against a
well,
certain type of paradigm.
it might be. I don't know. Sometimes they stray away from the script, and the audience will they'll voice their displeasure. I mean, you can't ignore that the success of Star Wars and the movie Avatar seems to be a lot to do with it follows the script. It follows the hero's journey, and when they stray away from that, the audience is not happy, male or female. But
Well,
you know, maybe more males, but all sorts of people are unhappy about it when they stray away from that script.
maybe music is more of a thing. I believe in this imposition and weaponization of media, right? Like, even though I
Oh,
love
yeah.
media and I love YouTube and all this, I love it, but I also can see it for what it is for some reason. Not everybody can, or most people should, but they don't. But really, what it is, it's a control mechanism that you have to be able to filter and use properly. Like, listening to music is not listening to music. Listening to music is like taking a pill. People don't really understand that.
That's
And
right.
so, and like, that's a huge, like, I mean, if you talk about sympathetic resonance, you talk about anything to do with the way our universe is structured sonoluminescently, and all the way through with sonic, anything to do with audio really is really not treated the way it should be, if you know any, if you really kind of come to terms with what it's all about. And then
Music moves you. It moves me, and it moved me at a
changes
very young
DNA
age.
probably. It probably changes DNA for all we know. Like, you know what I mean? If that's what we're implying, that we have this universe, things can be modified. That's really what it is. EU is basically saying, hey guys, like, shit can be modified. Like, it's not this speed limit and that speed limit and this rule and that rule. It's actually this much larger thing where there are tons of domains of interest. I mean, if you just go into Cartesian shit, like the shit Descartes was talking about, is just so deep in terms of our purvey and our domain. And what I was saying about what we see, there's so little information about optics and focus and vanishing point and depth of field. It's just, it doesn't exist online for your average person. It took me
Well,
years
because we
sorry.
don't know what the basic principle is of light.
So
So
is
we
it
can
fair to
only
say why are we going to
describe some
Mars
of
then?
the actions of it, right?
Yeah, so but think about it. It's the most fundamental thing. One of the most fundamental thing of our like as far as senses are concerned,
I
right?
think it is one of the fundamental things. I think light is energy.
So how do we have goddamn reality TV with Kardashians and like we have like silly name the next Mars rover and like we don't know shit about optics and vanishing point and very simple logical fundamentals about how the eye works and
Unfortunately, you just by only one of these sessions, you missed a very spirited dialogue / debate between Rick and I as to who's controlling, and it goes down that old rabbit hole. We had
Yeah,
fun.
last talk was good, but it wasn't recorded.
I know.
I've watched the last 4, I think, on the live stream on the channel.
Yeah, this one was not recorded, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was a good one though. I enjoyed it.
It was definitely spirited.
You guys are so
No,
welcoming, and
we
thanks
weren't
for putting
angry
up
at
with
each
all my.
other,
No,
anything
no,
like
it was
that. We were
spirited,
just
like
we
this.
were just like you were. He had his point, I had my point, and we tried to mold them together. Kind of. That's what I thought anyway.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was like tension meets where does pressure meet tension, you know? It's like you can have something pressing and pulling at the same time, which is rather yogic in many ways.
Maybe therapeutic even.
Oh, you never know. I guess it could be.
It's funny how you go through the journey of being able to question and then being able to get to this place where you're like, man, I don't know how to articulate what I really want to question. And by the time you get to being able to articulate it, you no longer want to question. And it's this really beautiful dance that we live in, you know?
Yeah. It is. And by the way, look at these symbols here, chemical symbols. The first one here is fire, and it's a pyramid.
I can tell you a bunch about this. So the cut off top of a pyramid is the strongest form of a magnet. That's why I think the idea of the pyramids being power stations sort of can be, or even like putting a person.
Well, I think it has more to do with the cosmic mountain coming down from Mars and just devastating the Earth. And an inverted pyramid is water.
Right.
But Rick,
that planet Mars dumping water on Earth.
I'm going to challenge you, Rick. Why does it have to be one and not the other? Why couldn't it be both?
Well, no, it can be both. I make that point a lot, right? I make that point a lot of times that planets could be created in electric accretion. They could be spat out of gas giants, and they could be created along the Birkeland current / Herbig-Haro objects, along with the suns and the gas giants and the brown dwarfs, and it could be all three things, in fact.
I think I have maybe a proper scientific explanation for it. So the top of a pyramid coming to a point basically is like a Gaussian dump. It dumps a lot of the magnetic field out because it comes to this point. If you cut off the top of a pyramid, it basically becomes the power of a pyramidal magnetic field, but coming to kind of this larger surface area, therefore creating, I would assume, a more powerful surface by which to hover over. No, right. I don't know that, but possibly.
You're on the right track. have you heard of Sam Osmanovic and the Bosnian pyramids, Chris?
Yeah, definitely from way
All
back.
right.
But then
Yeah.
I re-looked.
Well, he got a bunch of guys in there with some equipment and in drones and stuff, magnetic equipment and detectors, and they detected Birkeland currents coming off of the top of the pyramid. And he said that they leave the pyramid and they angle off and they go directly to the sun.
You know, like, I mean, that's totally true. I mean, the other thing is if you go really into the mundane, these are like our elevator symbols, they're arrows on a website. Like these shapes are so permeate our reality so deeply.
So
Like
prevalent, yeah.
some of them don't, you know, some of them like the Bluetooth one, when I saw that rune that you showed, I found that a few years back and I was like, holy fuck, really? I'll tell you, I'll go one further. If you look at the circuit boards and motherboards, our circuitry are runes. If you look at them, they're actually like runic symbols through
Wow.
motherboards and circuit boards. It's like this crazy fucking thing. If you zoom out and then you see cities, again, it's recursive fractal visual information. And you know, like the idea of the river that you were talking about, Ramon, like of course, like the flow of the river is akin to the flow of the Birkeland current and the lightning filament, right? And the
Right.
little static electricity from your finger to the doorknob, right? And so I was thinking about that whole Kirlian photography thing in a way that's like, man, people don't know about that. It's a really deep topic that like really was looked into for a second, but then wasn't. A little bit like Ralph Jurgens and the electric scarring on the moon. It's like he did that in a void. That Ponce article exists in a void. I guess more data doesn't like exist beyond that, but certain, I don't know, I'm getting into far different topics, but I'd love to talk to y'all at some point about this like lunar history. Maybe we can do a show that's lunar history.
Yeah, we're supposed to do kind of like a general Mars. Um,
Oh, hell yeah. We're
so,
going to interview you, bro. Go ahead, Grimmon.
it would be do all sorts of the bodies and like some of the weird aspects of different bodies.
Well, let's look at the moon together. Basically, I'll figure out how to get my OBS or whatever. You guys can. I could. Yeah. Even
Yeah,
like,
we're gonna have to
figure out
figure
how that works. Yep. Sorry.
yeah, we're gonna have to figure out a way that that we can broadcast your stuff into Neil's house, and Neil can. I guess you
I
could
could
just
do it right now. Like,
and
let me just see if this works. Actually, you could just go to
yeah,
my
you know,
page. Just give me a second.
yeah,
Sorry.
fire it
No,
up,
I have to like
fire it
get
up, son.
We'll see some jupe setting. I've been sitting here watching jupe setting while talking to y'all, thinking like about like how, I gotta say, man, I know it sounds crazy, but really all of space comes to your fucking eyeball. How? That's crazy to me. And we interpret it as so much information, and we look into its depths. But it really, in a way, we seek it, and it comes to us. Is this really? Anyway, I'm getting esoteric on optics, but man, like that is such a topic that needs more discussion in
Everything
just
is
general.
connected.